Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the London Institute of South Asia. It's a pleasure to have you on here. I know it's a working day. It has not been very easy for those of you who have been able to make it here. But I'd like to tell you something about this particular institution. This is not an institution which we call a typical think tank. We are unique in certain ways. We are unique in a way that we are not the mainstream media. We are an alternative source of media, or you may, if you like to call, as I call it, the poor man's media. And I think you cannot make an ingress into the mainstream media, because mainstream media, in my perception and my experience over the period of years, and all my learned colleagues who are sitting here on my right, most of them are the directors of this particular institution, and they have come from different parts of the globe. This particular institution, we are very fortunate to have the architect or the pioneer of this institution with us today. And that is the gentleman sitting here, Brigadier Usman. Very rare for a soldier to be, as some people think soldiers don't think. What I don't know whether they think or not, but he's the one who is basically a thinker. Perhaps he was a misfit in the army, which I don't think so, which he did a wonderful job there too. But he's a scholar in his right, and we have always benefited from his wisdom and for his vision. And we are very grateful to him to give this grounding to this particular institution. And they have then elected me or selected me to take on from where he had left. And this particular institution, as I said, is an alternative media. We publish our quarterly journal. Those of you who haven't seen one, over that place on the window, we have got some of the samples of what we produce. This is produced every quarterly. In addition, we produce at least 1 to 2 books every year under our auspices, which happen to be basically focusing on South Asia itself. But you'll appreciate that it's not just South Asia. When we talk about South Asia in the modern day world, in what people like to call a global village, unfortunately, because since it has become a global village, it has become the most difficult place that the world is. It's become the most dangerous place on God's earth. Normally villages are more peaceful than this one word that we are seeing today. So this particular institution, as I've stated to you, is not part of any government. It is not part of any NGO. It does not believe in any particular school of thought, but we believe in all the people who believe in the school of thought of justice, truth, fair play, and lack of oppression to anybody. We are at the same time not a human rights organization. Hamid, can you do me the favor? Sure. I don't have, here I've got IT expert. I can't switch it off. Forgive me. So we are not that way too. So we are very much political in our concept, because the whole world is governed by a system of politics, and there is political dispensation all over the world. We, bearing that in mind, we have stated ourselves, or we have accredited ourselves certain goals. And I will just tell you what actually this particular institution is all about. It shall campaign for human rights of all communities and individuals wherever they be, primarily the focus being on South Asia. We are determined to expose discriminatory policies and actions of any nation that is directed against other nations or against its own people. Please mark the word. We are also opposed to those people who are fighting their own people. There are oppressed communities in South Asia to an extent, some by propaganda, some are the real ones. You will be hearing various speakers from different parts of South Asia, and you will be able to make your own judgment on that score, and that is the part of the mission that has been given to us by our leader, who is sitting right here. We are committed to support all freedom struggles. And I will qualify which kind of freedom struggles. We are primarily a campaigning organization. At the same time, we try to influence the policies of the government of various countries who are amenable to us and who are prepared to think, we will keep on talking, we will keep on campaigning till we succeed in our mission. We are for the truth, we'll speak the truth, and we will propagate truth, and we'll expose the lies. That is what generally we are, and we are honest about it. Now, some of the precise definitions of our mission. We are against military occupation of any nation, be it India, be it any other country, be it Afghanistan, be it Iraq, be it the United States of America. We are absolutely against it. We are against terrorism in all forms, and including state terrorism, mind you, and against state terrorism. You will hear the speakers, you will begin to realize what state terrorism is today, because some of them have prepared it on that line as well. Because our subject today is state terrorism. We are committed to support all genuine freedom struggles that have moral, historical, and political legitimacy. It is not that tomorrow somebody just rises from some nation, we want an independent Suba. No, sorry, we are not going to support it till it is legitimate, till it is aspiration of people, till it has got historical precedents. It is not just someone can just come with an offshoot with no historical precedence of a freedom struggle. That is not on. Yes, if through self-determination certain people under the circumstances that they may have been oppressed by their own nation come through a system of self-determination and come up, yes, we shall support them. Otherwise not. We support equal rights for all nations, people, big or small, weak or powerful, rich or poor. So it doesn't mean that we don't bother about Nepal. It doesn't mean we don't bother about Sri Lanka. And doesn't mean that we are scared of stronger country like United States, China, Russia, or for that matter, India. We support the rights of all indigenous people. My friends will elaborate what indigenous people are, but I just stated that we shall support that. We shall endeavor to protect people wherever justice, fairness, freedom, and truths are denied. We support human rights, but above all, we support human dignity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you should appreciate these are very big ideals. You say, who the hell can achieve that? But please realize, till you talk, till you say what you want, nobody's going to give it to you. Those of you who understand Urdu a little bit, वो कहते हैं बच्चे को भी दूध नहीं मिलता जब तक वो रोता नहीं है, माँ भी दूध नहीं पिलाती है. तो अगर आप जब तक हम बोलेंगे नहीं, आगे कुछ कहेंगे नहीं, तो हमें हमारे राइट्स कौन देगा? So that's why I said we are a campaigning. In that sense, we are a campaigning institution. We have always tried to bring on our platform leaders and academics, philosophers and thinkers, political scientists and historians who share the objectives of peace and freedom for the peoples of South Asia. And we should be most welcome, those of you who have come here for the first time, of your support, because it is with your support that we'll be able to carry forward our mission. So much so about Lisa for those of you who were not familiar with it. Now, without much ado, I'll try to get on to the subject today. And the subject that we had selected looks like to be a subject which has been treaded upon by millions. That is terrorism. But perhaps you will be able to hear some views on terrorism which is not carried out by the mainstream media. So please do not be alarmed if you hear some fiery and emotional things to which you are not used to. Right? There will be certain things, but they have to be backed up with evidence. And if they don't back up with the evidence, you please feel free to ask them the questions towards the end of the seminar. It is important to bear in mind that the term terrorism is commonly used as a term of abuse. Galiye, not accurate description at all. It is close to a historical truth that our terrorism against them is right, but their terrorism against me is true terrorism. As long as this practice is adopted, discussion on terrorism becomes fruitless. It is no more than a form of propaganda and apologetics. I haven't said that. This has been said by one of the leading international activists by the name of Noam Chomsky, which all of you are very familiar with. They are certainly not my words. We also said today that we will be taking some of the historical aspects of terrorism. I will not take the thunder out of the speakers who are way more qualified than I am to speak on this subject, but I'll briefly touch down on the synopsis as to what we are going to discuss today. From a historical perspective, terrorism is not a new phenomenon, but for good reasons. 21st century in which you and I are living is described as age of terrorism. The 9/11 attacks marked a salient turning point in the history of the United States and indeed the global geopolitics. When US declared war on terror as its top priority, it changed the domestic, national, and international canvas of the globe. Everyone uses the term of terrorism, but who really understands it? What precisely is terrorism? What causes it? Who engages in it? Should terrorists be identified according to their intentions, ideologies, tactics, or targets? When is violence justified so that it is not called terrorism anymore? Was the world's most deplorable terrorist action taken or not when the United States dropped 2 atomic weapons on Japan in the World War II? That is for you to decide. And this you should decide in view of what is the definition of terrorism as provided by the United Nations or provided by the West or provided by the United States of America, not as you perceive. It is for you to decide, does it fit in there? And if it doesn't fall into the parameters of their definition, then is terrorism as defined today totally false and incorrect? In the nebulous name of terrorism, wars are being fought today. Geopolitical dynamics are shifting very, very rapidly. Just take the last 4 years. You will see how fast things are moving. Would it be justified to state that United States, India, Israel, Russia, and many other nations joined the bandwagon and aggressively destroying the basic concept of democracy, liberty, human rights, and waging war against people of their own nations, and particularly the nations across the oceans? How would you like to describe the attacks on the occupation of so many nations as we stand today? I would leave it to your guess. Some of the speakers might like to dwell if you like to know how many countries in the world are today under military occupation. And how many such countries are from what ethnic group and what religious categories? वो जिसे कहते हैं, जो आप समझते हैं, दूध दा दूध ते पानी हो जाएगा. Then you will absolutely be able to find out what exactly is happening in this world. And these are no conspiracy theories. These are the truths. These are evidence which are happening today, and we got to be aware of it. All I can say is, see what has this happened to the sovereignty in the last few years to Afghanistan. What has happened to the sovereignty of Pakistan? What has happened to the sovereignty of Iraq? What has happened to the sovereignty of various other nations who cannot even utter one word today because there are military bases or military presence in those countries? All I can say is, it is undeniable fact that most of the used words in the current vocabulary, terrorism, is also one of the most exploited, and I said in the beginning, the abused term. Let's not forget, when we're defining terrorism, one man's terrorist is a well-known adage. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. How do you distinguish between a freedom fighting and terrorism? So you define terrorism the way it suits you. As I said right in the beginning, the one who works against my interest is a terrorist. As simple as that, no matter who it be. Take some more examples. For Israel and US governments, Palestinian organizations are terrorists, but to Palestinians and the nations with an iota of conscience or with any morality, they are freedom fighters opposing their occupation by a Zionist aggression or Zionism control. The Indian government considers groups working to liberate Kashmir from Indian oppression and illegal occupation to be terrorists, while the Kashmiris Pakistanis, and again, the people with an iota of common sense and even legality, even the United Nations legality, they call them liberators. Now even these countries, under the war that has been waged in the name of terror, even those countries do not think that this is a war of liberation. Somehow the machinations of 3 or 4 countries in the world who control the world, I think my friend Hamid Saeed might be able to elaborate on that subsequently, because he's an analyst, will be able to tell you who really governs this world and what really is happening and why it is happening. And then I have some friends here who might like to say, how do we get out of it? So that is, ladies and gentlemen, our basic subject today. So, but I mean, I could go on. I haven't got a right to speak today because the chairman is here. He has just told me not more than 10 minutes, and I shall not take more than 10 minutes. I've got, I think, 1.5 minutes more to go. I would just state one thing. Let me refresh your memories very, very briefly, particularly for the ladies who have just arrived at the back. US hailed Osama bin Laden and his comrades as freedom fighters just 25 years ago. That is in the 1980s. That was Osama bin Laden. While many government officials even denounced, and there was Western democratic governments who denounced and called Nelson Mandela as a terrorist. So I don't know. Is Nelson Mandela was a terrorist turned into a peace lover? Or who was Osama bin Laden and when he was? I leave it for your judgment. I have today been very fortunate that I have got some very literary figures who are present here. I've got friends who hold very eminent positions. I've got doctors from various universities here, including those from Oxford and Cambridge. I've got the people who represent some school, some think tank organization. But to start with, I shall request my friend Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed to do the opening and speak on the subject. I'd like to introduce him, ladies and gentlemen, who those of you who do not know who Dr. Ishtiaq is. Dr. Ishtiaq is a Quaid-e-Azam Fellow at St. Anthony's College and Senior Research Associate at the Center for International Studies, Department of Politics and International Relations, University of Oxford, United Kingdom. He is also an Associate Professor of International Relations at Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. He is a former journalist. Dr. Ahmed has published widely on South Asian security, conflict in Afghanistan, US policy towards South Asia, and contemporary Muslim world. His publication includes several books, chapters, and articles. Currently, Dr. Ahmed is actively engaged in a research on conflict resolution in Afghanistan, a subject dear to all. And he has basically not only explored some of the theoretical models to resolve the problem, but also he has tried to highlight some of the practical possibilities, particularly concerning reconciliation. His approach is, being a doctor, being a learned man, non-violent man, he believes and he thinks that there may be a way forward to resolve the matter without resorting to violence. So I present to you Dr. Ishtiaq.
Let me thank Ambassador Ismat Saeed and the management of the London Center of South Asia. The title of my paper is Terrorism in South Asia, Roots, Manifestations and Prospects. Just to stay focused on the subject, I will mostly read out the stuff here, and I will basically pick from where Ambassador Ismat left. Basically, he was trying to clarify, the concept of terrorism, and I think before discussing the origins of terrorism and its current manifestations, it is extremely important to really understand the concept or the theory of terrorism. Let me start with an opening paragraph that basically South Asia has seen interstate wars and intrastate violent movements during most of its post-colonial history. But its experience with terrorism by non-state actors is relatively recent as compared to other regions such as the Middle East. In the last decade or so, South Asia has indeed emerged as the center stage of international terrorism, with horrendous implications for countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan, which are obviously its principal victims. Even India, as South Asia's largest state, is not immune, in my words, from the terrorist fallout. In fact, the emergence of terrorism as the most dominating form of conflict-generating activity in the region has put South Asia in jeopardy and its whole quest for peace and progress in future. So in this paper, I first lay down the historical context for this demonic occurrence in the region and then explain its complex current manifestations. The prospects for South Asia beyond the present phase of terrorism is a subject that I deal in the end. It is, however, important at the start, as I said before, to conceptually clarify the various aspects of terrorism in terms especially of their applicability to the South Asian reality. 5 of these aspects, in my view, are specifically worth clarifying. First, terrorism is a complex subject. Therefore, it cannot be understood simplistically. We have to explore gray areas and avoid generalizations if we wish to logically understand terrorism. This means that causes and manifestations of terrorism may differ from situation to situation, bound by time and space. For instance, conditions under which terrorism has evolved in South Asia in recent years should not necessarily resemble those that gave rise to terrorism in Latin America or Western Europe in the previous decades. Second, terrorism is a highly subjective and contested term. States and scholars may have failed to define terrorism, but they do agree to its 4 important elements. Number 1, terrorism is an act of violence. 2, it is deliberately undertaken. 3, its primary targets are unarmed civilians. 4, its immediate motive is to create fear. The definitional dispute is over the identity of the perpetrator. Since states have a monopoly over using violence, even though with some legally specified preconditions, statist and even scholarly definitions of terrorism identify only non-state actors as perpetrators. Another relatively minor issue that statist definitions of terrorism skip, but some scholarly definitions do not, pertains to the broader motivation behind a terrorist act, which is largely believed to be political. Third, the idea of non-state terrorism as a largely politically motivated activity implies that terrorists are non-state actors, and they, just like states, are guided by certain rational choices. They employ terrorism as a means rather than an end. The end in most cases consists of pragmatically defined political objectives. Psychological effect of terror is generated through a physical act of terrorism to realize these larger objectives. Fourth, an implication that flows from the aforementioned definitional problem regarding the perpetrator of terrorism pertains to instances of violence against civilians committed by states. Under international law, a sovereign state facing armed insurgency may employ violent means to preserve its territorial integrity, but only if these means specifically target the insurgents. In such instances, violence committed by insurgents against not only unarmed civilians but also security forces of the state concerned may qualify as an act of terrorism. However, in the case of a disputed territory, not only can a state's use of force against insurgent forces be termed state terrorism, but its claim of calling the insurgents as terrorists may also be questioned. Finally, just as terrorism is a means, is not an end, religion has acted as a means rather than an end in most instances of international terrorism in recent decades. Neither South Asia as a region nor Islam as a religion is an exception to this reality. A particular faith can be directly associated with terrorism only when it is undertaken for a purely religious goal. And obviously, terrorism, like other forms of terrorism in the history, is motivated by pragmatic political ambitions, even if they tend to justify it in the name of long-standing Muslim conflicts such as Palestine. However, just because a cause pronounced by a terrorist organization is just does not make the killing of civilians in its name morally justifiable. I have highlighted these 5 conceptual clarities because they apply to the South Asian situation as it practically manifests itself, and therefore, which is what I am going to discuss, and I will highlight basically 5 important aspects as far as the practical side of terrorism within the South Asian region is concerned. First of all, in my view, terrorism is a relatively recent phenomenon in South Asia, as I said before. Until a decade ago, the region did experience instances of terrorism, but their occurrence was largely a part of wars between countries or civil wars within a state. On the whole, however, terrorism, especially by non-state actors, remained a sporadic activity in South Asia. It is only, and I will underline this, it is only since the start of the war on terror a decade ago that terrorism has emerged as the region's most dominant form of politically motivated violence. Secondly, the roots of this terrorism and all of its complexities are essentially a consequence of the 1980s jihad against the Soviets in Afghanistan, which was sponsored by the United States and its Cold War allies. The jihad waged with Pakistan's border regions with Afghanistan acting as a launching pad for various kinds of mujahideen, including primarily Afghan mujahideen. The sudden withdrawal of international support to mujahideen following the Soviet defeat created the context for the emergence of Al-Qaeda and other militant groups and their terrorist activities throughout the 1990s and beyond. Now, given Pakistan's exceptional geographical, ethnic and historical link with Afghanistan, it was but natural for the ensuing anarchy in Afghanistan to seriously impact Pakistan's fragile security, economic, political and social situation. This was especially because of the continued presence of millions of Afghan refugees in the country. Now, left alone to tackle the messy and complex situation, Pakistan also made a mistake, in my opinion, of overlooking or even assisting the militarization of a traditionally pacifist self-determination struggle in Kashmir. And like Saudi Arabia, Pakistan's bet on the Taliban to restore peace in Afghanistan also failed. While in power, Taliban preferred to act independently, especially by hosting Al-Qaeda and permitting its international terrorist campaign. Now, this is a brief backdrop to the events of 9/11. The consequent international war in Afghanistan is what has brought South Asia to face the current hyper form of non-state terrorism. In retrospect, therefore, be it the critical issue of Pakistan's tribal areas acting as safe haven for Taliban-led insurgents in Afghanistan, or the worrying affair of the growth of extremism and its terrorist consequences in Pakistan, the root cause lies in the globally sponsored Afghan jihad of the 1980s. Now, it is quite often that we find that when it comes to mentioning the 10-year-old jihad, Western policymakers or analysts skip that 10-year period and just emphasize as to what is happening, these days in Pakistan or in recent years. But I believe, until and unless we go back and look at what went on at that time, because whatever took place in the next 20 years until now is essentially a consequence of the jihad. In other words, if that last concluding episode of the Cold War not occurred, the conflict in South Asia would still be the same traditional conflict, perhaps related to war or civil wars, not involving the sort of non-state terrorism that we have been seeing in recent years. A third complex reality in South Asian terrorism is the complexity of the historical context for the present wave of terrorism in South Asia means that its current manifestations are equally intricate. Now, this intricacy is reflected in the formations of terrorist organizations and their motivations. Al-Qaeda was globally oriented. TTP is Pakistan specific. Lashkar-e-Taiba could be stated to be Kashmir or India or South Asia specific. Afghan Taliban movement is Afghanistan specific. What connects them all is their willingness actually to maim and kill unarmed civilians, which is what is called terrorism, whatever disputes regarding its definition may be. What may be most significant for all South Asian countries is a common goal that connects all of these terrorist organizations, which is that of creating interstate conflict or sabotaging cooperative trends among them. Such trends include the 6-year-old peace process between India and Pakistan or the recent improvements in Afghanistan-Pakistan relations. Now, each time when a terrorist instance occurs, be it in Afghanistan or be it in India, the general tendency among the regional states is falling into the trap set for them by the terrorist organizations, which have this rational objective of creating, sustaining, and conflagrating intrastate or interstate conflict in the region. A fourth characteristic of terrorism in South Asia, in my opinion, pertains to the role of the state, which again involves considerable complexity and has roots going back to the anti-Soviet jihad. Now, time and again, Pakistan comes under international scrutiny and consequent pressure on account of its state covertly having an alliance with the very terrorist organizations it publicly pronounces to be fighting as a frontline state in the war on terror. However, if closely analyzed, this duality issue is not as simple as it is generally portrayed. Now, if 9/11 was an example of a Frankenstein monster, Al-Qaeda, eventually haunting its own creator, the United States, there have been many instances in Pakistan, especially in recent years, whereby the very organizations whose militant activities in Afghanistan and Kashmir were once overlooked or even supervised by the country's security establishment have carried out spectacular terrorist attacks against Pakistani security personnel and installations. Even otherwise, the security, economic, political, and social consequences of the non-state terrorism across Pakistan have been so devastating that it would be foolhardy or even suicidal for its civilian government or security establishment to cut deal with hardcore terrorist organizations with the expectation of a lasting peace. Now, there may indeed be cases where Pakistan has practiced toughness towards one terrorist group and leniency towards another. However, this is largely an issue of setting different priorities due to the complex nature of regional terrorism. Pakistan, however, does share the larger global goal of defeating terrorism as an illegitimate and morally unjustifiable violent activity. The issue of state terrorism or state-sponsored terrorism likewise does not have a straightforward explanation. For instance, when Pakistani security forces attack Taliban insurgents, they cannot be accused of committing state terrorism. Moreover, insurgent attacks against them are as much terroristic as they are against unarmed civilians. On the contrary, and I would argue, India's employment of force in Kashmir could be labeled as state terrorism given the region's disputed nature. However, terrorism by non-state actors victimizing unarmed civilians, even in a disputed land such as Kashmir, cannot be morally justifiable, even though their armed activity specifically targeting state security forces may be debatable. A final point regarding the practical manifestations of terrorism in South Asia regards the role of religion, which I believe is extremely important. We often hear from suicide bombers who fail to explode and are nabbed by security forces that their motivation behind dying is to go to the heaven. Such desire may be cited as a proof that somehow religion is the end and not merely a means of terrorism. However, the fact is that the motivations of those who finance and train these suicide bombers are hardly religious per se. In fact, from Al-Qaeda to TTP, terrorist organizations misuse the faith of Islam to justify terrorism in its name, even though their principal terrorist motivation is political. Terrorism being committed in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and elsewhere in South Asia falls in this category. And those who undertake it have deviated from the righteous path of religion. I believe that these deviants constitute a tiny minority continues to be a ground reality in Pakistan, where the volatile issue of blasphemy and not the widening base of TTP or other terrorist organizations has recently caused a couple of high-profile terrorist assassinations. Therefore, in my opinion, we should not confuse the two issues. The issue of blasphemy cannot be confused with other issues which underpin terrorist activities by TTP and other groups. In fact, in recent years, Pakistan's public opinion has predominantly turned against Taliban and their affiliates because of the populist view that no cause justifies the killing of innocent civilians or even security personnel. Now, within South Asia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, to a lesser extent, have been victims of the decade-long wave of non-state terrorism. Here I basically suggest a way out of the terrorist quagmire in South Asia. First, I highlight a couple of important thematic issues, and then finally describe what should happen in the case of Afghanistan and what Pakistan needs to do, or what India has to undertake for moving South Asia beyond the current phase of terrorism. But there are a couple of important issues that I highlight in the beginning. First, United States and other extra-regional powers may have helped Afghanistan and Pakistan to combat terrorists and fight insurgents, and provided crucial support for expanding political, economic, and social capacity, particularly in Afghanistan. However, their visible preference for exercising military means in the war on terror has simultaneously introduced potentially destabilizing elements to the already complicated regional security environment. Instances of civilian casualties in NATO bombardment in Afghanistan and US drone strikes in Pakistan's tribal areas contribute to terrorist recruitment, a process that effectively neutralizes the successes already achieved in the difficult campaign to combat terrorism and fight insurgency simultaneously. At least this is true in Pakistan's case, where almost the entire nation considers US drone attacks as a violation of the country's sovereignty. If combating terrorism amounts to winning the hearts and minds of extremists, so as to dissuade them from terrorism, then how can we presume that such instances of the so-called collateral damage will not create additional breeding grounds of terrorism? The role of outside powers fighting terrorism in South Asia, I believe, should be restricted only to help the region move beyond terrorism, not to let the region further steep into the terrorist quagmire. A second observation relates to the complexity of counter-terrorism in South Asia. Radicalism is a tendency that once grips a particular locality or a section of population, say the border regions of Afghanistan and Pakistan, takes time to become history. Jihad in the name of Islam has taken over 30 years to nurture itself as a regressive ideology. And military-centric international counterinsurgency campaign in post-Taliban Afghanistan may have only fueled it further. Other complications of counter-terrorism in South Asia include the presence still in Pakistan of almost 1.6 registered million Afghan refugees. There is also this fact of Afghan state still refusing to recognize the Durand Line. Even otherwise, non-state terrorism, it is also believed, in an increasingly globalized world of today, knows no boundaries. Seen in this backdrop, it is possible for a terrorist entity based in Afghanistan to stage a terrorist activity in Pakistan and vice versa. India and Pakistan are also not immune from the cross-border tendency of non-state terrorism. This reinforces the previous point about the collective nature of the threat all countries of South Asia face from terrorism. Effectively tackling this threat requires a joint regional response, one in which each country does whatever in its capacity to facilitate and not to complicate the counter-terrorism task of the other. And this study's final observation, as I stated before, so what I argue in the end is that there is a certain onus of responsibility on each of the three countries. Two of them are the principal victims of terrorism, namely Afghanistan and Pakistan, and to a lesser extent India. Each of them needs to do something, and something needs to happen in each of them. In Afghanistan's case, I believe a promising trend of the withdrawal of foreign troops and start of the Taliban talks or the negotiating processes begin. And I think with regional states' assistance, if this comes out to be a promising negotiating process, then we can expect Afghanistan eventually to get out of this war syndrome of the last 30 years. In Pakistan's case, there have been many successes, and I try to argue there that Pakistan needs to actually build upon these successes and actually reach out to India and Afghanistan and try to convince them as to the sort of anti-Pakistan course that they have adopted in recent years unnecessarily basically needs to be changed. And in the end, I argue that there is something that India also needs to do, especially two things. One, that resolution of long-standing conflicts, not necessarily because the terrorist organizations commit terrorism in their name, but because why provide these groups an opportunity to exploit an issue? Why not settle it amicably by sitting on the negotiating table? Number two, basically each country, and especially these three countries, need to understand that if one country is fighting terrorism domestically, if all other countries are supporting it, they are basically fighting terrorism and trying to assure peace for themselves as well. So once all countries of South Asia develop a common stake and perceive non-state terrorism as a common danger, then we can argue that the common approach to tackle this threat will be evolved, and we can presume South Asia to transform itself beyond the current wave of terrorism in future. Thank you very much.
The founder of Dalit Voice, an organization that is devoted to the cause of Dalits in India. He is also the editor of Dalit Voice, which has been described in a release by Human Rights Watch as India's most widely circulated journal. So he is not an ordinary figure. He is an activist, a human rights worker. He is formerly a journalist of Indian Express. He has done a lot in his life. Under his dynamic leadership, the Dalit voice is notable for the radical anti-Semitism it preaches, and also its link to Afrocentrist ideologies. He declares the Indian castes as nations within the nation of India. Please mark, this is what his basic philosophy is. His magazine is a political magazine. It is published in Bangalore. He is in India. He has come all the way from there. That expresses the view of Dalits and other minorities who are suffering at the hands of the Indian government or Indian people. I just want to make one last thing. I've had some emails which has been suggesting that it is his comments about the Dalits which have encouraged the Kashmiris in Kashmir to carry out what they carried out last year. That is the Intifada, the way the movement was done. So a lot has been attributable to VT, not only what happens on the eastern part of India, but also on the occupied areas of India which are there. Mr. VT Rajshekhar.
Brigadier Khalid, Brigadier Ismat, Sardar Aulak, ladies and gentlemen. The subject given to me is too big because it concerns a country with a massive population of 1,300 million, next only to China. My name is V-T Rajshekhar. I have been a journalist and writer for the past 60 years. Currently the editor of the 31-year-old Dalit Voice, an English fortnightly, leading journal of India's over 80% persecuted nationality is denied human rights. That's how we describe our paper. I am also the author of many books, but also the victim of a very deadly cult called Brahmanism, which is the biggest terrorist organization in the world today. And it is also a counterpart of Zionism. Brahmanism in India and Zionism in the West. I would request you to think about it. And the representative of Zionism, Rupert Murdoch, is today pounding Britain and made monkeys of the people with this scandal sheet of millions of daily circulation. Look at the power of the boss of this stinking gutter press. Despite all the havoc that he created in UK, and this mad dog has been biting anybody and everybody, not a single victim of this dog bite had the courage to identify this dog. And name the dog. Forget about shooting it. See the power and sweep and arrogance of this Jew who moves about as if he is the ruler of the world. If the West has been the victim of Zionism, we in India are the victims of Brahmanism, which our study reveals is much more deadly and yet more highly deceptive. For information, the Jews and the Jews of India are brothers. My 30-year-old investigation and research into this fact, I have published at least 2-3 books on it. Till today, nobody has contradicted it. Wikipedia has written some 15 to 30 pages on me, commenting on this. For information, the Jews and the Jews of India are brothers. In Britain, US, Europe, etc., the Christian citizens have been at least able to identify their enemy. But in India, no victim of this dog bite is able to find out who actually is biting them and why. This is because the Jews of India, as we call them, have disguised themselves as Hindu. There is a problem, which is a misleading and mischievous term. That brings me to the subject of Hindu terrorism. But foreigners like you will not be able to understand what is Hindu terrorism unless you know what is this Hindu. Who is this Hindu? Which itself is a mischievous and misleading term. Too confusing. You will be shocked to know that in India there is nobody called Hindu. I am not a Hindu. If you ask a Brahmin, are you a Hindu? He will be furious and hit back saying, shut up, I am a Brahmin, not a Hindu. Who else is Hindu in Hindu India? The people are divided and also identified on the basis of their caste. Castes and communities and religions. The following is the statistics of the three important religions. Without understanding the composition of the Indian population, we can't understand the nature of Hindu terrorism. If possible, please take down these figures, very important, nobody will tell you this. Segment number 1, Muslims, 20% of the Indian population. We have more Muslims in India than Pakistan. Perhaps we are the biggest Muslim country in the world. We are the biggest. Indonesia is not a very good Muslim country, sir. Whereas the Muslims of India are very perfect Muslims. Muslims 20%, Christians 2.5%, Sikhs 2.5%, total 25%. This 25%, they are not anyway Hindu. That they admit now. They are classified as non-Hindu. They all rushed out of the Hindu gas chamber to save themselves and embrace the liberating religions. The others, most important segment is also not Hindu. Segment number 2. Scheduled castes, that is Dalits, we call ourselves Dalits, 20% of the population. Scheduled tribes, 10%. Backward caste, 35%. Total, 65%. Not single person is Hindu in this. Rather, they are the victims of Brahmanism, disguising themselves as Hindu. Then we come to the third segment, is the only one which can be called Hindu. Though strictly speaking, they are also not Hindu. Segment number 3, the Brahmin just to 2.5%. In Punjab, you had one notorious Sikh, a Brahmin convert to Sikhism, Master Tara Singh, who created all the problem. Am I right? One mischievous fellow converted himself to Sikhism and created all the problem for Sikhs. Brahmins form just 2.5%. Number 2, the Kshatriyas, a warrior class, they are 0.5%. And they are almost all dead now. Number 3, the Banyas. You have got plenty of them in London, doing the same job, sucking the blood. You know the head of these Banyas? Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, the Gujarati Banya, who created all the problem of this country. He is the head of the terrorism. 10%, though the Shudras, 6% of that, are the co-opted, unwilling brothers. If you go through the above figures carefully, you will understand that there are no Hindus in Hindu India. And there is nothing called Hindu in India. Too much of a mystery. Then, from where did this magic word of Hindu spring up to mesmerize the whole country and the world and keep us as its eternal mental and physical slaves? It is this mere 2.5% Brahminical people disguising as Hindu who converted the people of the second segment, 65%, into Hindu, and thereby enslaved the country permanently. This is the simple trick they adopted to keep us enslaved. Being the rulers of the land, even when the British were ruling the country, they were able to inherit the whole empire by carefully establishing their hold on the media. The first job was to capture the media. And the education system, which were bent upon to Hinduize. Hinduizing means enslaving the non-Hindu SC, ST, BC 65%. They have achieved 150% success in this game by selling their 330 million gods we are having. When India became independent, the population of India was 30 crores. We had 33 crore gods. Our population was 30 crores. We had 33 crores of gods.
More than
They pauperized these entire sections, made these non-Hindu, if not anti-Hindu victims into devout Hindus, thereby making them docile, but at the same time let loose these hounds against Muslims, Christians and Sikhs. And then with the help of the Brahminical media, painted them as terrorists. Today, Muslims are terrorists, Sikhs anyway are terrorists. Aurangzeb Sahib has gone away to America and is sitting there. He is not even allowed to come to India. So, Sikhs, the Sikh terrorists were tackled in the Blue Star operation in the year 1981. I was also arrested and called a terrorist. I was put in the Punjab jail in Chandigarh as a terrorist in the year 1981 or so, and finished them once for all. Today, the principal Sikh party in the Sikh-dominated Punjab, the Akali Dal, is a partner in the principal Hindu terrorist party called the BJP. What a tragedy. Sikhs themselves are joined them. Indian Muslims, who constitute the world's largest Muslim segment, have been dubbed terrorists. Jailed and tortured mentally and physically. Thousands of Muslims are rotting in jails since years. There is no count. The judiciary, also being Hindu, is unconcerned. The media, being 150% Hindu, takes the lead in painting the Muslims as anti-national. Christians have been silenced by dubbing them mischievous, saboteurs, by converting the poor Dalits and tribals to reduce the Hindu population. The Brahmins have resorted to this course as this is the only way to keep themselves as rulers of the land. It's called divide and rule, a very beautiful game. As a first step, they have Hinduized the non-Hindu scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and backward castes, 65%, and then instigated them against their own blood brothers, Muslim, Christians and Sikhs, 25%, and thereby converted the whole country into a land of perpetual perpetual warfare. India can be easily called the world's most violent country. All in the name of ahimsa. Very non-violently are killed. Since Hindu India is the only country that believes in non-violence, all this is done non-violently. To facilitate this eternal warfare, they have permanently impoverished the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and backward castes, total 65%, and let loose the Hinduized hounds against Muslims, Christians, 25%. This is called the divide and rule principle. Brahmins are experts in this. There are so many religious scriptures which teach divide and rule policy. When the brothers are busy fighting and killing each other, the ruling Brahmins, that is just 10%, can easily and comfortably rule India with the ready help of their Jewish brothers controlling United States and other Western countries. This, in a nutshell, is Hindu terrorism, which is a daily feature of India's chaotic life. Finally, because of these uncontrollable internal contradictions, the Hindu government in India was finally forced to arrest 10 to 15 Hindu terrorists headed by a serving Lieutenant Colonel Srikant Purohit, a serving officer. He had been to Israel at least 2-3 times, got all the money, who is a close confidant of the Zionist Israel, which has supplied him arms and every other support, funds. The government in power knows all these things, which is also Brahminical, is fully in the know of all the things, but simply closed its eyes. The top culprits are all comfortably placed in the jail. They are looked after very well for over a decade now. You can take it from us that nothing will happen to them. The subject given to me is too vast and extremely complicated to a foreign audience. So it's not possible to explain in short, in such a short time. However, I can try if the chairman permits me some questions to clear the doubts. Thank you.
Thank you. You just heard Mr. V.T. Rajshekhar. As I said during that, whatever figures he has got absolute full evidence to substantiate in any international court. And that is an assurance that we have had. There are a few ladies right here which I forgot, some of them have left. They are very learned scholars here, and I am particularly grateful to you. This is Mr. Shama Ahmad. She is a counselor and has been a mayor as well, and she's MPE. And I'm aware of the fact that you need to go somewhere, but for as long as you can sit, we'll be honored by your presence here. If you have any questions, we can ask all towards the end, towards V.T. Rajshekhar. That also includes the panel which is sitting here. Please feel free to communicate with him or anything. And if you do not know his address, you want to communicate to him, ask me. I will get on to him subsequently. Now, the next speaker is the gentleman sitting next to Dr. Ishtiaq. His name is Brigadier Hamid Saeed. Ladies and gentlemen, he's a soldier, a scholar, and an analyst of extraordinary abilities. He hates to call himself as a politician, but somehow he served as a minister in the government of Pakistan, where he was admired and feared as an individual of very high integrity, honesty, and remarkable efficiency, a very rare commodity in the political circles of Pakistan. He is a prolific writer who has written several books and articles and essays. His contributions in the field of Urdu literature, amazingly, coming from a soldier, is a shining example of his scholarly ability. His book, Sat Shara Ghalib, that is the interpretation of Ghalib's Ashars, is a highly unique, refreshing, and educative book that has rightfully earned a very high place in Urdu literature in the entire subcontinent. He has, in fact, just elaborating a little further, that some of the established views in history about Ghalib have been put aside, and he's given a very fresh look to what Ghalib actually meant by those, and they were very great scholars. Initially, his book was taken with skepticism, that how can he talk about Maulana Azad or Mir Taqi-Mir, who had interpreted it, but the way he is interpreted, not that we are selling his book or anything like that. If you read that book, I think you will really admire that. It's a worth reading book. His latest book, which he has released in a few days back, is on religion, or I would say on religious history. It's called Mizan-e Umr Aisha. Those of you who are not Muslims, you do realize the Prophet Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's wife, Aisha Siddiqa, her age has been described as 9 years. Even some of the people, scholars within Islam, insisted that she was 9 years at the time of age. This gentleman has done a research which is totally irrefutable. I have gone through it. It's one of the masterpieces of research effort done by any scholar. And he is not basically proclaimed as a religious scholar, but he has done it as a scholar. And he's established that Hazrat Aisha's age at the time of marriage with the Prophet was under no circumstances less than 19. And though it refutes one or two hadiths, but the fact is he has proved that those hadiths were not satisfactory. And he has come up with a conclusion that any man with a basic logic and understanding will do that. I am particularly deliberating on those, for particularly those who are Muslims sitting here, because besides that, it has also become a system of slandering the life of the Prophet in a way, as you know, has been coming up at various places. First of all, the Muslims must know the truth themselves. And the friends of Muslims who are sitting here today should also realize that that is not correct. We are guilty. Those Muslims who have planted this seed into the minds of our enemies to exploit it to our disadvantage. So that is the work of this man. I thought I must let you know that, because I was personally very impressed. I thought I must make a mention that. He's a man of multifarious qualities, but at heart a soldier. His basic abilities are inherent in the field of security and intelligence, and I don't think anybody could be more qualified to speak on terrorism or counter-terrorism than him. So, Hamid Said, so if you like to sit there, would you like to come here?
I'm still not old enough to sit.
I'm glad. Keep the spirit.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, I start with a prayer from the Holy Book that Prophet Musa alayhi salam recited to the Creator, Almighty Allah. Rabbi sharah li sadri wa jassir li amri wahlul uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. O God, open my breast upon me, make my task easier, remove the impediment of my speech, so that you people understand. Ameen. After a wonderful discourse by Dr. Iftikhar and Mr. Shekhar, I don't think I have to really go into the nuts and bolts of terrorism. To make it slightly lighter for you, I have adopted a different course. Of the 9 basic instincts given to the human beings, an important one is the instinct of self-preservation. Everybody wants to survive. And complementary to the self-preservation are 2 more instincts, the instincts of fear and pugnacity, to fight back. You run away or you fight back, aim being to survive. From the religious scriptures, we find that the first fight took place between the 2 sons of Prophet Adam, who fought over a woman, and Qabil killed Habil. That's all what I could get to. So shall we say there have been battles for the women, or perhaps the first one was definitely for a woman. This precedence was followed, as Homer tells us, for the Helen of Troy. The Spartans attacked Troy to get back their queen, and thereafter Caesar followed the same course and attacked Egypt to get to Cleopatra. So, conclusion number one, there have been wars, there have been battles for the sake of women. Mongols and Tartars, they devastated, destroyed half the world for the sake of loot and plunder. Same course was adopted by Tamerlane, who devastated most part of Central Asia with no defined purpose, because though he was known to be a Muslim, he destroyed most of the Muslim states which were neighboring his area. Then there were wars for the sake of religion, in the name of religion, shall we say, and that is the so-called crusades, which lasted for over 100 years. We come to 12th century AD. And now we suddenly come across Hassan bin Sabah, an intellectual, perverted genius, a man gifted with wonderful qualities, creative. He created a paradise on earth, got some people addicted to hashish, and under the influence of hashish they were made to visit that paradise where most beautiful women from all parts of the world had been gathered as hurrains. They are called as hoors, and the hoors would look after the semi-intoxicated man, and he would think that he had really had a visit to the paradise. To have a second visit, he would obey every commandment which was given to him. No, the word assassin, as we know today, he assassinated. This word assassinated is from hashish, hashishiyan, and the act of assassination was actually the act of hashishiyans to kill somebody, to eliminate him, murder him, stab him. So, this person, as I said, had creative qualities, but satanic mind, and he is the first known, established, confirmed terrorist which has been recorded in history. At one time, Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi, Richard the Lionheart, Ferdinand of Germany, and Philip of France, they all signed treaties of peace with that man, that we will not interfere with you and please don't have us stabbed. So powerful was that man, and this is the fear of terror. They say Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi, no, the Seljuk ruler at that time, one day decided, he talked to his wife, said, this man is now becoming extra powerful, and I think we should think about eliminating him, doing something against him. Next morning, he found a dagger thrust into his pillows with a chit, don't even think of it. Right, gentlemen? What about Nader Shah Durrani? His general massacre in Delhi for 3 days. What about Napoleon, who set out to conquer Europe? What about Hitler, who under the superficial, ill-founded, self-conceited concept of German racial superiority thought that he had the right to rule over the world? Who gave this right to the white to invade Africa and enslave millions of blacks to work on their fields for years, centuries to come? Well, this is just a short overview of what happened in the past. We're missing an important aspect. The Aryan Brahmins, our good friends, When they descended, I will say descended because they were divine people, so they descended in the subcontinent in 1500 before Christ. They were genius, real. They had the genius mind and satanic motives. They decided to subjugate the people's mind. They said they were created from the head, arms and thighs of Vishnu, the superior castes, and rest everybody was created from the feet of Vishnu. They were the Dalits and Shudras, untouchables. So with this concept, they placed them at the highest plane and put everybody else below them. Don't you think it was a master genius? They subjugated the people of the subcontinent for thousands of years, and that is going on even today, as Mr. Shekhar amply clarified that. So since the past 3,500 years, the Indian strategy has been successful. I'm referring to the Brahmins. Unfortunately, at the time of partition in 1947, Dalits failed to avail the generous offer of Mr. Jinnah, who had given a blank paper duly signed to say to the Dalit leaders, write your terms as you wish. A similar offer was made to the Sikh leadership, and unfortunately, they also failed to understand the importance of that thing and could not encash that blank check. I come to conclude this part. In the earlier times, battles were fought essentially for the purpose of security. Personal security, security of the relatives, clan, family, tribe, town, city, and subsequently the nation states. Some wars were fought for personal grandeur and fame, as in the case of Alexander the Great. He had no motive, but he wanted to be called the greatest conqueror. Limited battles were also fought for women. Fighting also took place in the name of religion, whereas the hidden motive was of territorial gains. And some was, of course, in this hidden game, as I mentioned, the aim was also to monopolize the trade routes and dominate the seas, wealth, and other imperial interests. Earlier battles were essentially fought over control of natural resources, water, mineral wealth, pastures, hunting grounds, cultivable land, forests, horses, etc. By the turn of 18th century, and with the advent of Industrial Revolution, sources of energy like coal, gas, and oil became the bone of contention. Please note what I'm saying now. With the progress of science and technology and ability to split the atom for the production of atomic weapons, a race started for the production of weapons of mass destruction, and uranium and plutonium also gained undue importance. Now, gentlemen, the theory of Macinder's heartland was pronounced much later, but as Glub Pasha states, starting from Julius Caesar to Caliph Umar, from Ottomans to the Fatimids, from Dutch, French, Portuguese to the British and Germans, all were aware of the importance of those areas which now form essential part of the heartland. Central Asia, which has once importance for its geostrategic location and its position to control the lines of communication, has now assumed greater importance because of the largest oil reserves. After the disintegration of USSR, America emerged as the only superpower. But unfortunately, Now it is not the American interests which are being guarded. American resources are being used by the cabal elite to the formation of a one world government. And somebody mentioned here, it is the Zionist lobby. Now, to prepare the American nation for casualties.
Excuse me, what did you say? What elite?
Cabal elite. Cabal elite.
What's the cabal elite?
I didn't want to go into details. It's a Zionist elite. Actually, this derived from the word cabal. It was Kabbalah, original word from Ibrani. Okay, Semitic. But today as cabal is any secret organization which is working towards a particular end. Enough to understand. Now this cabal elite is a group of people whose motives should be well understood. There are my friends sitting around and many others with whom I've discussed. They say, we don't believe in this conspiracy theory. I said, yes, this is ostrich-like approach. You see things happening before you. You see actual confirmation by the events. And you say, we don't believe in conspiracy theory. Right? To this end, I think I'll state that once there was general sort of attack on the forest, and camels were running, and along with them a rabbit was also running. So somebody said, why are you running? They said, camels are being caught today for being slaughtered. They said, but you are a rabbit. He said, by the time they find out I'm a rabbit, I would have been slaughtered. So I think by the time we know that there is a world elite which is after destroying the world peace and to bring or to get hold of all the resources of the world in their hands, it will be little too late. All right, sir. Now let's see what the cabal says about itself. In the year 1774, yes, I didn't make a mistake. It is 1774 in Frankfurt. Amschel Mayor Rothschild says, we must direct wars so that the belligerent nations on both sides are further in our stranglehold. He said it, I didn't. We have to understand that this elite wants to rule the world through one world government. They say, thrive on the wars and widespread human misery, on death and destruction by design, lock them into debt, make them spend the money borrowed from the banks of the elite, and destroy the middle class. Gentlemen, today the United Nations is under a national debt of $4,700 billion. In the year in the year 2005, 28 million Americans were insecure, as per a survey carried out. In the year 2007, 46 million Americans are insecure. 20% Americans are likely to be destitute this year, and 38 million Americans are now receiving the food coupons. All this money is going to the coffers of the elite. Shall I seek your pardon? The topic given to me was terrorism. Now this is what terrorism is. You cannot make an American fight, you cannot make an American to be jobless, you cannot make an American to feel economically insecure unless you first tell him that your freedom and your security is at stake. And they have made the Americans believe that their security and freedom is at stake. And which is the enemy? Terrorism. Now keep on chasing the shadows and keep on killing as many people as you wish. You will never be able to eliminate terrorism. And this is an ongoing war, and all money flowing to the coffers of the cabal elite. I have to be brief, if I've already not consumed my time, sir. Almost have. So there is a little gunjaish. Little gunjaish.
Yes.
Okay, right. Mr. Saeed Ismat has amply clarified, and my other friends, Nelson Mandela, was he a freedom fighter? Once a terrorist, freedom fighter. In East India Company, who came as traders, and they dislodged the ruling emperors, and they got hold of this land. Who was the terrorist? Titu Mir, Mir Qasim, Sultan Tipu were the terrorists or the freedom fighters. Chapati movement, Reshmi Mal movement were the terrorist movements or the genuine resistance movements. General Dyer's firing on unarmed mob in Jallianwala Garden, Amritsar, killing hundreds of innocent people, was that not terrorism? Black hole incident, was that not terrorism? Killing by suffocation the prisoners in containers in Afghanistan by the United States, is that not terrorism? Inhuman torture during interrogation using electrocution, drugs, dogs in Al Gharaib jail of Afghanistan and Guantanamo Bay. Perhaps that's not terrorism either. Rapes, murder, disappearance of thousands of Kashmiris by Indian occupant forces.
Golden Temple.
That comes next. Not terrorism. Use of depleted uranium in Iraq, which has resulted in the largest number of cancer cases in the world today. This is not terrorism. And attack in India on the Samjhauta Express, which was mentioned here, for which the Treasury benches of US held Pakistan responsible. After 4 years of investigation, the Indians themselves say it was done by the Indians, and a serving Lieutenant Colonel Prohat was a party to it. Gentlemen, this is it. This is the root of the terrorism. Ever since the Americans have come into this region, just say see the statistics. Were there more acts of suicide bombing before or after this incident? Are they on the increase? Are they decreasing? So I think we are chasing the shadows of terrorism. Aims have been amply clarified. Thank you very much for giving me a patient hearing.
Thank you, Brigadier Hamid Said, for going into the history of Brahmanism and the invasion of India for more than 3,500 years backwards, and talking about how they managed to control India. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is a very distinguished person. He is Dr. Gurmeet Singh Aulak, most prominent, most visible right here in front of you. He is the President of Council of Khalistan, an organization that supports creation of Khalistan, an independent sovereign Sikh nation in South Asia. He is prominent and a major international figure in the Khalistan movement, and has made efforts to do extensive lobbying with sympathetic politicians in the United States as well as in the United Kingdom. In other words, living outside, he is trying to promote the cause of Khalistan by lobbying. He's keeping it alive in the intellectual field, in the political field, and in the scholarly field. He is the President of Khalistan. He is the President of Khalistan, as I say, which was declared by Panthic Committee, that is Sarbat Khalsa and Khalsa Panth, on October the 7th, 1987. He has made efforts to lobby politicians all over. Dr. Aulak has been a lobbyist for Khalistan's cause and has managed support from around the globe. He is a prominent personality, and one day, hopefully, we wish your dreams and your efforts come true, that we see you as the President of Khalistan.
Thank you, Brigadier Ismat Said, Mr. Chairman, my old friend Brigadier Khalid, and respected learned guests. We have heard quite a bit about terrorism and Brahmanism, and my topic I was given state and individual terrorism in perspective and retrospect, Indian genocide against Sikhs and other minorities. Thank you for inviting me to participate in your forum on state and individual terrorism. I am pleased to have the opportunity to share information about Indian terrorism against other minorities. It is great to be back here at London Institute of South Asia, and I'm very pleased to be here again. London Institute of South Asia is doing a very good job in really disseminating the information about the freedom movements in South Asia and human rights violation and terrorism by the Indian government. James Madison, the primary author of the US Constitution and fourth President of the United States, warned of the tyranny of the majority. That is why the US Constitution has strong protection for minority and individual rights and a Republican, decentralized government structure. India, the self-proclaimed world's largest democracy, is proof that Madison was absolutely right. Without effective protection for individual rights and those of the communities and states, the majority runs roughshod over the rights, interests, and lives of the minorities. India does this to Sikhs, Muslims, Christians, Bodos, Assamese, Manipuris, Dalits, and so many others. India proclaims itself to be a democracy. However, the essence of democracy is the right to self-determination. That means more than just holding multi-party elections. It doesn't matter to Sikhs, to Christians, Muslims, Dalits, or other minorities who wins the election. The repression continues. As US Representative Adolphus Towns has said, the mere fact that they have right to choose their oppressor does not mean they live in a democracy. The Council of Khalistan, which I had, often cites these statistics on India's genocide. They are startling. A report issued by Movement Against State Repression shows that India admitted that it held 52,268 political prisoners under the Repressive, Terrorist and Disruptive Activities Act, TADA, even though it expired in 1995. Many have been in illegal custody since 1984. There has been no list published by those who are acquitted under TADA and those who are still rotting in Indian jails. According to Amnesty International, there are tens of thousands of other minorities being held as political prisoners. Movement Against State Repression report quotes the Punjab Civil Magistrate as writing, if we add up the figures of the last few years, the number of innocent persons killed would run into lakhs, which means hundreds of thousands. According to former Member of Parliament Simranjit Singh Mann, the Indian government has murdered over 1 million Sikhs since 1982. This aligns with the threat made by the former Speaker of the Lok Sabha, Balram Jakhar, who said, if we have to kill 1 million Sikhs to preserve our territorial integrity, so be it. In 1994, according to US State Department, Indian regime paid more than 41,000 cash bounties to police officers for killing Sikhs. Over 50,000 Sikhs youth were killed and secretly cremated by the police as unidentified bodies. The person who exposed the secret cremation policy, Sardar Jaswant Singh Khalda, was arrested and murdered in police custody. Even protesting corruption will get you in trouble. Recently, activist Anna Hazare, Yoga Guru Baba Ramdev, and their followers were forcibly removed from Gandhi cremation site after hundreds of people gathered in Delhi to hear Hazare condemn the police crackdown against Baba Ramdev, who continues his fast in his hometown of Haridwar. According to BBC, Mr. Hazare also held a fast against corruption in April. Baba Ramdev is demanding the return of bribe money held overseas. Honest people have joined hands to speak about corruption. That people of India are fed up with the corruption, bribery, and accumulation of dirty money by the ruling class. Congress party leader Sonia Gandhi and her son Rahul were recently seen in Switzerland taking care of their secret Swiss bank accounts where they kept their black money. Sadly, the leadership of Punjab is no better. The Badal family also accumulated large amount of black money through corruption. It is also stashed away in other countries like the money of the Gandhis. Chief Minister Badal's son Sukhbir recently opened a massive hotel of over 1,000 rooms in Gurgaon, a suburb of Delhi, worth thousands of crores of rupees. He did not even open the hotel in Punjab and create jobs in Punjab. The money came from corruption. Mr. Badal's late wife, Surinder Kaur, could tell just how much money was in a bag just by lifting it. This is how deeply the corruption is rooted. That money was collected, selling jobs to the people of Punjab. Even driver job was sold for black money. The whole government machinery was so corrupt, they had a name for bribery, and it was called fee for service. In addition to a genocidal policies against the Sikhs, India has also killed more than 300,000 Christians in Nagaland, over 100,000 Muslims in Kashmir, tens of thousands of other Christians, Muslims throughout the country, and tens of thousands of Tamils, Assamese, Manipuris, and others. The Indian Supreme Court called the Indian government murder of Sikhs worse than genocide. But these atrocities only tell part of the story. Just last month, we observed the 27th anniversary of the Golden Temple massacre of June 1984. Over 20,000 Sikhs in all lost their lives in these attacks known as Operation Blue Star. More than 100 Sikh boys aged 18 to 13 were taken outside and asked if they supported Khalistan, the independent Sikh homeland. When they answered, Bole So Nihal, they were brutally shot to death. The Indian Army even shot bullet holes into an original copy of Guru Granth Sahib, the Sikh holy scripture, written in the times of the Gurus. The Guru Granth Sahib was granted Guruship by the last Guru of the 10 Sikh Gurus, Guru Gobind Singh Sahib. They removed the ancient writings from the Gurus and others of that time. These writings have never been returned. On June 7th, with the fighting essentially over, they burned the Central Library complex, destroying many priceless manuscripts. This is an act of terrorism against the Sikh people. Sadly, this is typical of the way the India's so-called democracy operates. India is a fascist state under a democratic facade. Sikhs, such as Rajiv Singh Randhawa, the late Sukhbir Singh Osan, founder of Burning Punjab, and others would later find themselves being harassed and threatened by the Indian government for peaceful activities. Jathedar Gurdev Singh Kaunke was murdered by police. No one has been held accountable. The driver of Baba Charan Singh had just had his legs tied to 2 jeeps, which then drove off in opposite directions, tearing him apart. The late governor of Punjab, Surendranath, was paid $1 billion to organize and support covert state terrorism in Punjab and Kashmir. According to Washington Times, India is fomenting cross-terrorism in the Pakistani province of Sindh. Indian agents often dress as militants to foment terrorist incidents. In one incident, 35 Sikhs were killed in the village of Chithi Singhpura. Two independent human rights organizations in Punjab, one of the Punjab Human Rights Organization and other by International Human Rights Organization, as well as an investigation by reporters Barry Brock of the New York Times, showed that the Indian agents disguised as militant carried out the attack. In his introduction to the Madeleine Albright book, The Mighty and the Almighty, former US President Bill Clinton wrote, "During my visit to India in 2000, some Hindu militants decided to vent their outrage by murdering 38 Sikhs in cold blood. If I hadn't made the trip, the victim would probably still be alive. If I hadn't made the trip because I feared what religious extremists might do, I could not have done my job as a president of the United States," unquote. The people who carried out the massacre spoke Hindi and said Jai Hind, which means long live India. One egregious case of Indian intelligence carrying out violence to harm the Sikh nation was the Air India bombing of 1985. Air India Flight 182 was blown up off Ireland in 1985. It was on its way from Toronto to Bombay. It was supposed to be blown up at London airport when no passenger would be aboard, but due to delay, it blew up over Ireland. Shortly after the bombing occurred, two Canadian journalists, Zuhair Kashmiri of Toronto Globe and Mail and Brian McAndrew of Toronto Star, wrote an excellent book on the case entitled Soft Target, which proves that the Indian government itself carried out the bombing, and this finding is confirmed in a book by a former member of Parliament, David Kilgour, entitled Betrayal, the Spy Canada Abandoned. In the book, Kashmiri and McAndrew quoted a Canadian security investigative service investigator as saying, "If you really want to clear the incident quickly, take Vance down to the Indian High Commission and the consulate in Toronto and Vancouver, load up everybody and take them down for questioning. We know it and they know it that they are involved." In spite of this, former DGP of Punjab Police KPS Gill, who is responsible for murder of tens of thousands of Sikhs, including Jaswant Singh Khalda, Jathedar Konke, recently made the ridiculous claim that the Canadian government was involved in the incident. Mr. Gill also falsely claimed that the United States and the United Kingdom were fomenting militancy, according to the Tribune of Chandigarh. This shows the length of the Indian regime will go to cover up its own culpability. The book shows that within hours of the flight was blown up, the Indian Consulate General in Toronto, Surinder Malak, called in a detailed description of the bombing and the names of those he said were involved. Information that Canadian government did not discover until weeks later. Mr. Malak told them that they should check the passenger list for an L Singh because he was responsible before there was any public knowledge of the bombing. According to Wikipedia, on June 20th, 1985, 2 days before the flight, at 1910 GMT, a man paid for the two tickets with $3,000 in cash at CP ticket office in Vancouver. The names on the reservation were changed Jaswant Singh became M. Singh, and Mohinder Bail Singh became L. Singh. Note that this is the same name that Consul General Malik told investigators to look for, L. Singh. It would later come out in newspaper report that a Sikh named Lal Singh told the press that he was offered $2 million and settlement in a nice country by the Indian regime to give false testimony in the case. Consul General Malik also had pulled his wife and daughter off the flight suddenly at the last minute on the feeble excuse that the daughter had a paper for school. A friend of Consul General Malik, who was a car dealer, also cancelled at the last minute. According to Kashmiri and McAndrew, curiously, Consul General Malik knew more details about the two blasts than did the police investigators. Malik said that while one of the suspects was booked to Japan, the other was booked to Toronto and onward to Bombay. He also said that the two checked their bomb-laden bags but did not board the flight themselves. In sum, Malik had painted a scenario of a double sabotage operation that was near perfect account of what the Mounties would take weeks to fathom. Consul General Malik continually fed the Globe information pointing to Sikh terrorists as the source of bombs. He was behind another story 6 days after the crash. This was headlined, Air India pilot reported given parcel by Sikh. Kashmiri and McAndrew also wrote, Malik pressured the Globe to publish this story, adding that it would be used to make a stronger case for blaming Air India and Narita bombing on Babur Khalsa leader. Malik also decried the Canadian system of justice for failing to come up with a quick solution to the bombing. In India, we would have had a confession by now. You people have too many civil and human rights laws, he complained. The main backer of the group that was supposedly behind the Air India bombing had received $2 million loan from the State Bank of India just before the plane was attacked, according to Soft Target. The year after the bombing, 3 Indian consul generals were asked to leave the country. At the time, okay, I have to round up fast. At the time, the Congress party needed the Sikhs as the scapegoat to win votes and law and order on the law and order platform. The attack served the justification for the government to shed more Sikh blood. Ladies and gentlemen, India is not a kind of democracy as it is perceived by the Western world and the world over. They are very dangerous and they are tyrants. It doesn't matter to them if you are a minority, you need to be killed. One RSS leader said, if you have to live in India, you either be a Hindu or subservient to the Hindus, and it is not acceptable to the Sikhs, and I don't think it is acceptable to any human being, to any Muslim minority or Christian minority. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alak. My apologies to you and also to the speakers to try to cut you short on this. As I said, that we like to keep it as brief as we possibly can. But it's a great honor. You have educated us on in some of the details that we were not aware of, and we are very happy about it. And gentlemen, our next speaker is the one I introduced even before I introduced myself, and very rightly too. That is Brigadier Usman Khalid. He is the architect of this particular organization, as I said earlier, those of you who weren't here at that point of time. And he is not an ordinary figure. He's a man of absolute vision. Though he spent the years, as I said about my other friend, that in the military, continuously seeking his guidance to tell us. He has, at this age, he has been not well. We have prayed for his health, but he has fought it like a soldier. So he still has great soldierly qualities still embedded in him. He has started a political party in Pakistan. Mind you, his political party is like this particular institution. That's a political party of the poor. That's a political party of the poor by the name of Rafe Party. And he still has the energy, he still has got the go. I'm not, this institution is not politically aligned, so I'm not here to speak about the Rafe Party, neither is this forum, that he would not be speaking about Rafe Party as well, but I must tell you that you can go to his site, you can look, if you want to know more about it, it's nothing but a vision. It's an idea about Pakistan, how to take it forward. And whether it's to be implemented politically or not, that is for people to find out. But he is trying to put some intellectuals, some thinkers on the ground to give us a semblance of putting the country back on road. So without much, anything more, sir, it will be our honor if you come over here.
Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I will not repeat what has been said before me. I'll concentrate directly on the area to which I belong and the region which is extremely important from the point of view of the fight against terror as is being talked about in the world today. And that area is Afghanistan and Pakistan. As we have seen, the spring in the Arab world has been bypassed by Al-Qaeda, and they have taken a new line altogether. Therefore, Al-Qaeda and the Takfiri philosophy on which it is based are something which are at present operative only in that region which is called Pakistan and Afghanistan. And therefore, the fate of that war which is taking place in Afghanistan and Pakistan today is going to affect not only those two countries but the entire region and probably the whole world. And that's why it is very important for us to understand as to what are they fighting about. In Pakistan, unfortunately, it's being portrayed as is it our war or is it America's war? No, sir. It is America's war for a different reason, it's our war for a different reason, but it's a war nevertheless. What are those reasons? For America, which was attacked on 9/11, and they accused that Osama bin Laden had done it, Al-Qaeda had done it, and they were based in Afghanistan, therefore they invaded Afghanistan. There is a lot of evidence today that that may well have been a false flag operation carried out by somebody else, but that's not the point. The point is that America came there and the fight started. Before that fight, as Dr. Ishtiaq has told you, there was a fight in Afghanistan in which the Soviet Union had to withdraw from there. That holds the key also to understanding as to what is happening there today. The Muslims lost the control of Palestine and of Kashmir, where they are in majority, while Muslims have gained control of all territories where they were in majority, except these two places. The humiliation that accompanies the occupation by India of Kashmir and by Israel of Palestine is something that has affected every Muslim everywhere in the world. The effect of those was that the people suddenly felt that the governments were failing them. The Muslims stretching from Indonesia to Morocco, they had all become free. They had gained a lot of wealth because of oil. They had military power as well, but repeatedly they were beaten by Israelis in wars in 1956 and 1963, and then in 1967, and then in 1973 to some extent. We fought 3 wars against India over Kashmir, and we didn't succeed either. Therefore, if there is a feeling among us, among all Muslims all over the world, that our governments are weak, the Muslims are disunited, therefore something should be done, and unless we are united, unless we become strong, we will not be able to get these territories back. Now this feeling of frustration brought about two great ideas. One was the restoration of jihad as a force. It had been until then considered that jihad can only be voiced by an Islamic state, by caliphate. So since there was no Islamic state in the world, therefore jihad could not be declared. For nearly 200-300 years, jihad had never been declared anywhere in the world. But in Afghanistan, jihad was declared, and was not declared by a state. It was declared by people of Afghanistan. And the person who gave it the intellectual basis, the scholarly basis, his name was Abdullah Salim Azam.
That's right.
That's the correct name. He was a Palestinian living in Egypt, and he was the one who encouraged Arab fighters to go to Afghanistan and fight over there. He was the mentor of Osama bin Laden as well. Osama bin Laden was a junior to him. He was the one who brought him there, and Osama bin Laden never had a very strong or a big role in the fight in Afghanistan. But when the fight ended, Abdullah Salim Azam declared that jihad had ended. Soviet Union, we had achieved our result. Soviet Union has withdrawn, and therefore jihad has ended. But this was not agreed to by Osama bin Laden and his new mentor now, which is Ahmed al-Zawahiri. They were the product of another cult, which is now we know as Takfiri cult, which started in Egypt. And we should know about Takfiri cult if you got to understand as to what is happening in our part of the world. That Takfiri cult has been defeated and beaten in Egypt. It has been defeated and beaten in Saudi Arabia. It has not caught on anywhere else, but is something which has become entrenched in our part of the world, in Pakistan and in Afghanistan. And therefore, we have got to understand that. What are they saying? What is the reason of their popularity and their support? And is it something we should fight, or is it something we should support? What should we do with it? Because Pakistan today is divided in between people who, some of them who think that we should support it, and the others who think that we should fight it. So unless this confusion, and you find that in Pakistan politics as well. Even a person like Imran Khan says this is not our war, it's America's war. When he says that, I mean, we're missing the point altogether. We are fighting a war, but two are fighting it for different reasons. Who are these Takfiri? Takfiri, after Sayyid Qutb, who was the founder of Khan al-Muslimin, he was hanged by Nasser. Then a big camp was set up in a concentration camp almost in Egypt, where all these so-called Islamists were hauled up and put in there. It was there that this al-Takfir wal-Hijra, the concept developed over a period of time. But it wasn't too well known. When Sayyid Qutb was hanged, these people said that he had supported it, that he had said before he was hanged that it is the duty of a Muslim, when the state is not Islamic, to migrate to a safe place and then from there to fight jihad, to liberate your state, or to go to a safe haven from which you can fight and liberate your country, or the safe haven first. Now, this idea germinated there, and those people continued to feel like they felt, because the feeling of disgust with repeated defeats at the hands of Israel was there. The cause was there, and therefore the feeling was there, and it wasn't something which was not genuine, and therefore people couldn't say it was wrong. So eventually, because of the fate Sayyid Qutb had met, his successor declared that he was wrong. And therefore, we should cooperate with the state, live in the state, and so on and so forth. Only one person who remained loyal to this idea was called Shukri Mustafa. And he founded this organization, or it's at least named, it's attributed to him that this cult was founded by him. he actually practiced it. Practiced in the sense that he gathered some of his supporters and actually went into caves. And those people, there were some women with him, and if they were married, they were wives of somebody. If they were not married, they were daughters of somebody. They renounced their marriage or they renounced their family links, and that's how they got publicity in the Egyptian press because of the fact that they had renounced the world and gone into caves. So they had carried out hijrah, and they had declared Egypt to be kafir country and the Egyptians to be kafir. Now what is al-takfir wal-hijrah? That you declare a segment of a populace because of their rulers or because of their own misdeeds, to declare them to be kafir, and then you declare jihad against them. So here is the difference between what Abdullah Salim Azam was saying, and here is what Takfiri was saying. Abdullah Salim Azam was saying that jihad is a legitimate fight for liberation of a people when your land is occupied. And it ends the moment the land has been liberated and the occupier has been ousted. The other people are saying, no, if the state is not properly being run in accordance with Sharia, then jihad can be carried out against that state and against the people of that state as well. So the main difference between the normal jihad, as we all understand and support, and between the Takfiri view was that in the Takfiri view, jihad could be carried out for the establishment of a Sharia state, Sharia enforcement of Sharia. Now when it came to our part of the world, a lot of ulama supported them because it was Abdullah Azam's idea which they were supporting. When he was slaughtered in front of a mosque in Peshawar, this was the first murder probably which was carried out by Takfiris. When he was slaughtered, at that time there wasn't an outcry in Pakistan. There should have been. We should have differentiated at that time that jihad and the jihad that these people are talking about is different. This jihad is to establish Islamic State or Khilafah or rule of Sharia, and that jihad is for liberation. Now that is the differentiation that we have got to make even today. And unless we make that and we keep on fighting this war, is it our war, is it America's war, then we'll continue to consume ourselves with a lot of passion, with a lot of pain, with a lot of death and destruction, but eventually get nowhere for the reason because we missed the point. So I think the main theme that I'm trying to convey to my friends today is that there is a war, the Americans are fighting it because they don't want Al-Qaeda or anybody else to find a safe haven from which they can attack the United States of America. That's a legitimate purpose. They have a legitimate cause. They don't want to be attacked by anybody who's from elsewhere to come and attack their country. They fail to understand that their reason for attacking their country is because they support Israel. So there is something, so we've got to make a point. The second point that we've got to make is that there is a link between why these people are attacking you, the United States of America, and the Afghan jihad. We have got to understand that we cannot permit jihad for the establishment of Khilafah or Sharia state or Islamic State or whatever name is used. Jihad is there for liberation. It's been resurrected after 300 years. It's a great thing that has happened, but it is not something that we have got to extend for establishment of a Sharia state. So one point that we as Pakistanis have to be able to make it is this one. The second is Americans have got to be told that we are fighting a war for a different reason. We are fighting a war because against Takfiris. We are not fighting a war against the Afghan Mujahideen because they are fighting a legitimate war against occupation. The Kashmiris are fighting a legitimate war against occupation. The Palestinians are fighting a legitimate war against occupation. The Iraqis have fought and won a legitimate war against occupation. These are legitimate wars. So the second point that we've got to be able to make is that there is a legitimate jihad is only for liberation. So therefore the Sikhs fight for their homeland. This is a fight which we will support not only because we are your friends, but also because our religion tells us to. If Dalits were to fight tomorrow for their liberation, it will not be because Mr. V.T. Rajshekhar is my friend. It will be because it's the right cause. So the war of liberation is a right war, and it's a war that we as Muslims must support. And this is something we should say loudly, and this is something we should say clearly, and that's why we will be a universal religion. We will have that claim to be a universal faith. So my friends, all that I'm trying to say today is that our war is different. Our war is against the Takfiri cult. The Americans are fighting, but the people might well be the same, or they may well overlap. So if we cooperate today, there is a reason for it. But the cooperation must be founded on truth, on full understanding why we are fighting and why they are fighting. And if we are clear, then there is a basis for cooperation between us and America. And we have got to be able to tell them that we disagree with you on Palestine, on Kashmir, on Dalits and Sikhs and so many other places in the world, because we as a universal faith consider it our duty to do certain things and to say certain things. If we are unable to do anything, at least we will say that this is what our religion preaches, this is what our religion tells us, and this is how we will cooperate, this is how we will differ, this is how we will fight, because there is a rationale, a very superior, profound, common sense rationale for what we are doing. Thank you, sir.
He's shown us a vision for way forward, and one which can possibly be achieved. I will leave it to you if you have certain questions. I have a few questions from him, but I'll ask him slightly later on this particular subject. And my question would be to him towards the end, but I can question him right now, but you can answer it. Whereas I 100% agree with him on the concept of jihad, the military jihad is against occupation. Military jihad is against physical aggression. I'm talking military jihad. But what Tafkiris are talking about, that is total compliance with Sharia, taking control in their hand. In other words, in this modern world, without a political setup, you give it into the hands of illiterate people and you don't know which way you're heading. Quite true. But the fact is, can we devise a strategy that since these people who are the modern day terrorists, the Tafkiris, and they're terrorists even for Pakistan, don't forget, the maximum casualties in the world are happening by Muslim terrorists against Muslims, not against Christians, not against any other religion. So we got to be, is there any scope of the kind of jihad that Brigadier Usman is talking about and the jihad that the Tafkiris are talking about? Is there a meeting point? Is this possible to carry them with us? Because Tafkiris have been taken good advantage of by the West in dividing our religion and destabilizing the Muslim states. So that's a question to ponder, that is there a way that we can talk to them? Is there a way that we can tell them that even if you want to carry out your jihad, first of all, let's fight the main jihad, that is the occupation. Having done that, we can sit down together and talk it later. Some compromise, is it possible? I'll just leave it to your good sense.
This is the point I missed because of the
time dimension.
Mentioned by Brigadier Hamid Said also.
Yes.
The Illuminati connection. The Illuminati want to establish a world order, a world state. And you find that there is something very remarkable about another thing that the Jews invented called communism. That also wanted a world state. You find strangely that Khilafah, as it is being talked about by the Takfiri, is not a state as Khilafah used to be, which was a state. But Khilafah, where the allegiance is to a Khalifa, but people do not necessarily live in a single state, but they have allegiance to a Khalifa. So it's a world order where Muslims, whether minority or majority, they owe their allegiance to a Khalifa. Therefore, you are being urged to be disloyal to the state in which you live, If you are a minority, then you should be disloyal because you are living in a state as a minority. And if you are in a majority, then you should be disloyal because it's not an Islamic state. So you are against the nation state. So you find that there is a connection between communism, the Illuminati idea, and even the Takfiri view of Islam. So I can't see, this is the logic of it. The physical evidence I cannot provide. But I think there is absolute validity in the argument that there is a Zionist Illuminati connection between all these world things that we from time to time come about. One is trying to convert the Muslims to this idea. The other is trying to convert the Western world to this idea. And the third is trying to convert the Eastern world, the communists, so to say, to this idea. But nevertheless, all should embrace the idea of a world government. So I think there's something sinister there, something for us to ponder, something for us to worry about.
This word cabal, as I briefly mentioned,
It is really a Hebrew word. Hebrew, yes, okay. It's the original pronunciation, as they said, was Kabbalah. But it's now based on the initials of 5 names of the ministers of Charles II, who entered in a secret treaty with France that in the case of a battle of England with Netherlands, France and Germany, so France and Great Britain will be the allies. And the names of the 5 ministers being Clifford, C, A for Arlington, B for Buckingham, A for Ashley, and Lauderdale for L. And this cabal then makes a secret treaty, and it's become symbolic that whenever you want to make a secret organization, you want to keep this secret, and it's not made known to public, and all the proceedings are secret with a particular design, with a motive, that is known as cabal. Now, cabal, we discussed enough about it, and there's tremendous amount of material available. All Freemasonries and other secret movements, by the way, time constraint, all organizational structure of these secret organizations has been taken from Hassan bin Sabah. World over, the same organizational structure has been used, and it is in use even today.
I've had, there were 2 more speakers who were supposed to speak today. And, but I think we are going to dispense with them, but it is my moral obligation that I tell you that they could not be here today. One of them was refused a visa. He's an Indian. I just want to introduce who he is. His name is Mr. Oliver D'Souza. Right? He is in Karnataka, state of India. He is the director of Globus Media Services. And he operates well over 24 websites providing news and information, primarily dealing with the oppressed communities of India and basically Dalits. He is the executive member of All India Christian Council. Don't forget, when you talk about Dalits, I take the liberties here because you do have to. Mr. Rajshekhar has got a name. Anyone who doesn't know Mr. Rajshekhar, you would think that he's a Hindu. Like hell, he's not a Hindu at all. So likewise, most of the names that are prevalent in India today are Hindu names with the whole word Hindu. Well, they are not. Right? And don't forget as well that there are Dalits who are Muslims. There are Dalit Sikhs, which some of us or around in the world publicly do not know. And the Dalits can be from any religion. And this gentleman that I'm talking about is a Christian. And he's done a great service to Christianity and as well service to India. And he is also the chairman of Dalit Research Foundation, which is a charitable organization. He's a prolific writer and has many books and publications to his credit. He's an activist. He has published a book which is available on as an e-book as well, called The Truth About Dalits. Quite a good book, authentic in terms of figures. We may disagree with some of the writings. The fact is, it's a good book, and it brings to light the plight of Dalits and how they have been dealt with and how could they improve their lot. I am nobody to speak about Dalits. Nobody is better worse than that, than Mr. V.T. Rajshekhar. He has struggled all his life in that direction, and his thing doesn't go. I'm afraid I had designated one of my nephews here. Could you please stand up? He's Jubran. He's a university student. I'd asked him to read the paper of Mr. Oliver D'Souza, but my apologies to you, son. It's not possible because we have run extremely short of time. I have conveyed his message. I will definitely publish, at least to start with, in my next journal, his article. Thanks very much, Jubran. Right. Now, before I actually wind up, which I won't take more than 5 to 6 minutes, I have here a gentleman, which some of you are quite aware of who he is. He is Mr. Samiullah Malik. He is a freelance journalist, a dedicated Kashmiri with a Pakistani origin. He has written extensively as an analyst of international relations. His columns are regularly appearing in various papers published in the United Kingdom, occupied Kashmir, Pakistan, and various other places. His articles can be read over more than 25 websites today. He writes very regularly. And accomplished engineer by profession, that's basically he is. And I will hand you over to Malik Saab, Samiullah Malik Saab.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لما تقولون ما لا تفعلون صدق الله العلي العظيم ربي اشرح لي صدري يسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم آمين يا رب العالمين. گرامی قدر مہمان گرامی اور خواتین و حضرات، انفیکٹ فارمیٹ تو انگلش کا ہے، لیکن کیونکہ پیغام گیلانی صاحب کا اردو کا ہے، اس لیے میں بھی چاہتا ہوں کہ میں بھی اس حوالے سے اردو میں بات کر لوں گا. اور میرا خیال ہے کہ ہال میں ہر آدمی اردو سمجھتا ہے، لیکن یہ میں کہہ سکتا ہوں کہ شاید ہر آدمی ایسی انگریزی نہ سمجھتا ہو جتنی وہ اردو سمجھتا ہے. عنوان جیسا کہ آپ نے بتایا کہ میں تو صرف وقت نہیں ہے، لیکن میں صرف چند پوائنٹس آپ کے سامنے سے رکھوں گا، چند نکات جس سے آپ اشارے آپ سے کہہ لیجیے. مسئلہ یہ ہے کہ پہلے تو یہ سمجھنے کی بات ہے کہ جس دہشت گردی کی تعریف ہے کیا، دہشت گردی ہے کیا، اس کی تعریف کون کرے گا اور کیسے کرے گا. کیا یہ دو ملکوں کی جنگ ہے، اقوام عالم میں کچھ جنگ ہے، یا دو سوچوں کی جنگ ہے، دو فکر کی جنگ ہے؟ کیونکہ لازمی بات ہے کہ دونوں ایک دوسرے کو دہشت گرد سمجھتے ہیں. جو لڑنے والے ہیں، ایک ہیرو ہوتا ہے اور ایک جو ولن ہوتا ہے، اور ہر کوئی آدمی جو ہے اپنے آپ کو ہیرو اور دوسرے کو ولن کہہ کے اسے دہشت گرد کا نام دیتا ہے. لیکن اشارات کے سامنے میں آپ کے سامنے عرض کرتا ہوں. پہلے آپ یہ دیکھیے کہ اس دنیا میں سب سے بڑا تباہی کا جو ویپن تیار کیا گیا وہ تو ایٹم بم تھا. آپ بتائیے کہ اس ایٹم بم کو بنایا کس نے؟ ایٹم بم کو کس نے بنایا، اور اس ایٹم بم بنانے والے سائنسدان کو کون جرمنی سے اٹھا کے لے گیا؟ وہ یہودی تھا اور اس کو امریکہ اٹھا کے لے گیا، اغوا کر کے لے گیا، اس سے پھر ایٹم بم بنوایا گیا. اور ہیروشیما اور ناگاساکی کے اندر چند لمحوں میں لاکھوں جانوں کو اڑا دیا گیا. اب پتہ نہیں دہشت گرد کون ہے، وہ مرنے والے جیپنیز یا کہ بم کا خالق یا بم مارنے والا. پھر 36 ملکوں میں آج تک جس ملک نے جارحیت کی اور بغیر کسی الٹیمیٹم کے وہ داخل ہو گیا اور ہر جگہ سے وہ شکست کھا کے ہی نکلا، لاکھوں آدمیوں کو اس نے تہہ تہہ کر دیا، کروڑوں کو اس نے تہہ تہہ کر دیا. اب پتہ نہیں اس امریکہ کو دہشت گرد کہیں یا کہ وہ مرنے والے تھے وہ دہشت گرد تھے. جس یورپ میں ہم رہ رہے ہیں، اس یورپ میں آپس کی جنگوں نے کروڑوں آدمیوں کو مار دیا. اب پتہ نہیں ان میں سے دہشت گرد کون تھا اور ان میں سے ہیرو کون تھا ان جنگوں کا. پھر دور نہ جائیں، آپ افغانستان میں چلے آئیں. افغانستان کے اندر دیکھیں کہ جس 9/11 کے بہانے کو بنا کے جنگ کا سامان شروع کیا گیا، آج بھی اگر نیٹ پہ جائیں تو بے شمار امریکہ کے بہت سے بڑے بڑے تھنک ٹینکس کے جو چلانے والے ہیں وہ آج بھی اسامہ بن لادن کو اس کا قصوروار نہیں بلکہ یہودیوں کو اس کا قصوروار سمجھتے ہیں. وہ کہتے ہیں کہ اسامہ بن لادن کو استعمال کیا گیا. بہرحال اب مجھے یہ نہیں سمجھ لگتی وہ ڈیزی کٹر بم مارنے والے وہ دہشت گرد تھے یا جو کہ اس کی زد میں آ گئے وہ دہشت گرد ہیں، یا آج بھی جو کہ ان بموں کی زد میں آ رہے ہیں، ان گولیوں کی زد میں آ رہے ہیں، وہ دہشت گرد ہیں۔ اب دور نہ جائیں، عراق کے اندر دیکھ لیں آپ کس بہانے کے ساتھ وہاں پہ عراق کے اندر جارحیت کی گئی، اور صدام کو محض اس بہانے سے کہ اس کے پاس دنیا کو تباہ کرنے والے ویپنز ہیں، اس بہانے سے اس پہ جارحیت کی گئی۔ لیکن بعد میں جنہوں نے الزام لگایا وہ خود انہوں نے اسی یو این او میں جہاں پہ کولن پاول ہی کہتا تھا کہ اس کے پاس یہ ویپنز ہیں، اسی کولن پاول نے دنیا کے سامنے، میڈیا کے سامنے اپنی شرمندگی کا اظہار کرتے ہوئے افسوس کا اظہار کیا۔ لیکن بتائیے کیا ایک لفظ سوری یا افسوس کرنے سے ہنستا بستا عراق جو ہے، جو کہ صدیاں لگ جائیں گے اس کو پھر بنانے میں، اس کو اجاڑ دیا گیا، آج بھی اس پہ برباد کیا جا رہا ہے۔ اب دہشت گرد کون ہے؟ یہ آپ بھی سمجھیے کہ دہشت گرد کون ہے۔ اب آئیے آپ کشمیر کے اندر، اس سے پہلے کہ میں کشمیر کی بات کروں، میں پچھلے ہفتے ایک بین الاقوامی کانفرنس تھی مصر کے اندر قاہرہ میں، تو قاہرہ میں جب میں گیا وہاں پہ میرے پاس 2 دن اور تھے، تو میرے ساتھ ایک گائیڈ بھی تھا، اور میں جب اس کے ساتھ چل رہا تھا میں، تو اس نے ایک جگہ گاڑی کھڑی کر دی، اور اس مجھے میرا گائیڈ بھی تھا، وہ مجھے دکھا رہا چیزیں، تو وہ باہر نکلا اور اس نے بغیر، یعنی میں نے اسے نہیں کہا کہ ابھی اسے کھڑا کرو، اس نے گاڑی کھڑی کرنے کے بعد وہ سیدھا گیا، گھر کے باہر ایک بورڈ لگا ہوا تھا، ایک تختی تھی نام کی لگی، اس نے جا کے اس سے پہلے بوسہ دیا۔ اب بوسہ دینے کے بعد مجھ سے پوچھتا ہے تمہیں پتہ ہے یہ کون ہے؟ میں نے کہا یہ کون ہے؟ جب اس نے نام لیا تو اس دنیا کا وہ سب سے ناپسندیدہ انسان ایمن ظہری کا اس نے نام لیا، اس نے کہا یہ اس کے باپ کا کلینک ہے۔ تو میں نے کہا کہ اس کو تو دنیا دہشت گرد کہتی ہے۔ تو ایجپشن جو بڑا مجھ سے 1.5 دن سے بڑا ہی محبت کرتا چلا آ رہا تھا، جب میں نے اسے یہ لفظ کہا تو اچانک سیخ پا ہو گیا وہ اس بات سن کے، اور اپنی اس ایجپشین عربی کے اس ایکسنٹ میں کہتا بے ہے یہ کیا بات ہے، کیا کہہ رہے ہو تم؟ حاضر رجل باطل، اس نے کہا یہ تو بہت بڑا آدمی ہے، اس نے عربی مجھے کہا۔ میں نے کہا اچھا ہوگا، چلو کوئی بات نہیں ہوگا۔ اس نے جا کے پھر اسے بوسہ دیا، اس نے کہا کہ تم کہتے ہو کہ یہ دہشت گرد ہے۔ اس نے باہر ایک بہت لمبی تعریف کی۔ اتفاق سے اگلے دن جب میں یونیورسٹی کے اندر تھا تو طلباء کے اندر ہی میں نے یہ بات پھر چھیڑ دی۔ میں نے کہا کہ سنا ہے کہ لوگ سب اسے دہشت گرد کہتے ہیں۔ تو وہاں ایک نوجوان لڑکا تھا، ابھی اس کی مسیں بھیگی تھیں، اور مجھے پتہ چلا کہ مجھے پہلی دفعہ اس دفعہ پتہ چلا کہ جب جامعہ الازہر میں اردو چیئر بھی رکھی گئی ہے، اور اردو چیئر جو ہے پچھلے 6 سال سے کام کر رہی وہاں پہ، اور وہاں پہ اس وقت جو ہے 68 طلباء جو ہیں وہ باقاعدہ جو ہے اس چیئر کے تحت وہ اردو سیکھ رہے ہیں، اور کچھ اس میں سے PhD بھی کر رہے ہیں۔ اور مجھے بڑی حیرت ہوئی جب ایجپشن میرے سامنے بڑے ہی نستعلیق زبان میں اقبال کے اور غالب کے اور میر تقی میر کے اشعار پڑھتے تھے، اور جب میں نے ان سے جب یہ سوال کیا تو جیسے وہ آگ بگولا ہو جائیں، اور مجھے ایک شخص نے کہا، لڑکے نے، جس کا میں ذکر کرنا چاہتا ہوں، عبداللہ فاض اس کا نام تھا، اس نے کہا کہ تمہیں پتہ ہے کہ دہشت گردی کی تعریف کیا ہے؟ اس نے کہا کہ تم چاہتے ہو کہ دہشت گردی کی تعریف کی جائے تو یہاں اسوان سے ہوتے ہوئے غزہ کے اندر جاؤ، تمہیں پتہ چلے کہ دہشت گردی کیا ہے۔ تم چاہتے ہو کہ دہشت گردی دیکھنا چاہتے ہو تو عراق کے اندر جاؤ، جہاں پہ 1.5 لاکھ آدمی محض ایک بہانے مفروضے میں مار دیے گئے اور آج بھی مارا جا رہے ہیں۔ اس نے کہا کہ تم دہشت گردی دیکھنا چاہتے ہو تو پھر کشمیر کے اندر جاؤ، جہاں 1 لاکھ سے زیادہ آدمیوں کو تہ کر دیا گیا۔ حالانکہ ہندوستان کے سب سے بڑا جو وزیر اعظم، چہیدہ وزیر اعظم پنڈت جواہر لال نہرو، اس نے اقوام عالم کے سامنے اس بات کا وعدہ کیا تھا کہ وہ کشمیریوں کو حق خود ارادیت دے گا، اور 10 ملکوں کی ضمانت بھی دی گئی تھی۔ اس نے کہا کہ آج 3 نسلوں سے وہ لوگ جو ہیں وہ قربانیاں دے رہے ہیں۔ اس نے کہا کہ تم اگر دیکھنا چاہتے ہو کشمیر میں جاؤ اور علی گیلانی سے جا کے پوچھو کہ دہشت گرد کون ہے، جہاں ہماری 6000 سے زیادہ بہنوں کو بے آبرو کر دیا گیا۔ اس نے کہا کہ تم اپنے ذہن میں وہ نقشہ ضرور اتارو فلسطین کا اور غزہ کا، جہاں پہ جب بچہ پیدا ہوتا ہے تو اس کے ایک کان میں اذان اور دوسرے کان میں اقامت کہی جاتی ہے، لیکن سامنے بٹھا کے اس کی شہادت کی دعا بھی کی جاتی ہے۔ اب میری سمجھ سے یہ بات باہر ہے کہ میں کس کو دہشت گرد کہوں اور کس کو دہشت گرد نہ کہوں۔ اب میں اس ہندوازم پہ آتا ہوں۔ راج شیکھر صاحب نے بہت اچھی باتیں ہندو کے بارے میں کہہ دی، میرا خیال ہے کہ اس سے زیادہ میں ہندو کی تعریف نہیں کر سکتا، لیکن دور نہ جائیں، آج کچھ سکھ بھائی میرے سامنے بیٹھے ہوئے ہیں، میں آپ کو صرف کشمیر میں چھتر سنگھ پورہ کا واقعہ یاد کرانا چاہتا ہوں۔ وہ کون لوگ تھے جنہوں نے آپ کے سکھوں کو مار دیا اور بعد میں الزام مسلمانوں پہ لگایا؟ لیکن جب ہندوستان کی حکومت نے خود ایک کمیشن مقرر کیا، 3 آدمی، ان میں ایک جسٹس بینس تھے اور ایک جنرل تھا اور ایک ایکٹیوسٹ تھا، ان تینوں نے رپورٹ جو بنائی اس کے بعد انہوں نے کہا کہ یہ ہندوستان کی راہ تھی جس نے کلنٹن کے دورے پہ ہندوستان کے دورے پہ ان سکھوں کو مارا تاکہ مسلمانوں کو متون کیا جا سکے. یہ ہندوستان کا ایک وہ بھی نقشہ ہے. اگر آپ یہ دیکھیں, مجھے یاد آتا ہے 47 جب تقسیم ہند ہوا اور پاکستان بنا, اس وقت 1 ملین سے زیادہ لوگوں کو مار دیا گیا. آج بھی 1.25 لاکھ سے زیادہ بچیاں مشرقی پنجاب میں مسلمانوں کی بیٹھی بچے جن رہی ہیں ہندوؤں کے اور دوسروں کے. کے ایل گابا جو کہ بہت بڑا ایک مصنف ہے ہندوستان کا, جو کہ بعد میں مسلمان ہوا, اور اس کا نام پھر بعد میں خالد لطیف گابا, پہلے کنہیا لال گابا تھا. اس نے اپنی کتاب لکھی پیسے وائس, مجبور آوازیں, اس کا ترجمہ ہوا. اس نے کہا کہ مشرقی پنجاب میں 11,500 کنویں بچیوں سے اٹ گئے تھے. اب مجھے بتائیے کہ دہشت گرد کون ہے؟ میں اس سے زیادہ اور کچھ نہیں کہنا چاہتا, بس اسی تعریف میں یہ بات کہنا چاہتا ہوں کیونکہ وقت نہیں ہے. اس سے پہلے میں اب گیلانی صاحب کا ایک میسج ہے جو میں آپ کو سنانا چاہتا ہوں. ہم نے تو ہندوستان جو کہ اپنے آپ کو بہت بڑی جمہوری حکومت کہتا ہے, لیکن آج تک مجھے یہ سمجھ نہیں آئی کہ فرض کر لیں 1 سیکنڈ کے لیے, میں تو یہ بھی نہیں کرنا چاہتا کہ بالفرض کشمیر جو ہے ہندوستان کا حصہ ہے, تو مجھے بتائیے کہ ہندوستان کے آئین کی کون سا آرٹیکل جو ہے وہ اس بات کی اجازت دیتا ہے کہ اپنے 1 لاکھ سے زیادہ شہریوں کو مار دیا جائے. اگر ہندوستان اتنا ہی جمہوری ملک ہے تو مجھے بتائیے کہ وہ آج تک بین الاقوامی پریس میڈیا کو وہاں کشمیر میں جانے کیوں نہیں دیتا؟ مجھے یہ بتائیں کہ ہندوستان کے پریس میں وہ بات کیوں نہیں بتاتے کہ طفیل متو بچہ جو تھا اسے کیوں مار دیا گیا؟ جب اس کا باپ اسے غسل دینے لگا تو اس کے منہ میں ادچبی ٹافی دیکھ کے وہ غش کھا کے گر گیا. وہاں نیلوفر آسیہ کے ساتھ کیا ہوا؟ وہاں ہماری ایک بہن ہے کشمیری پروفیسر ہے, اس کے خامد کو محض اس لیے اس کے شوہر کو سر کاٹ کے اس گھر کے آگے رکھ دیا کہ اس نے یہ محض یہ بات کہی تھی کہ اس نے یہ بات یاد دلائی تھی کہ بھی کشمیر کے اندر حق خود ارادیت کا جو ہے وعدہ اسے پورا کیا جائے. میں اس سے زیادہ اور کچھ نہیں کہنا چاہتا, میرا خیال یہ کافی ہے. میں آپ کو اب میں گیلانی صاحب کی طرف لے چلتا ہوں. یہ بھی ایک اس وقت رجل عظیم ہے جنہوں نے ساری عمر جو ہے جیل میں گزار دی, لیکن اپنی اس حق کی جو تحریک ہے اس سے آج تک وہ پیچھے نہیں ہٹے. میں بعض کا سوچتا ہوں کہ جس قدر صاحب ان کی ذات پہ وہ گزرے ہیں, اگر کوئی اور ہوتا تو آج تک ٹوٹ جاتا. لیکن میں آپ سب کے حوالے سے ان کو سلام پیش کرتا ہوں کہ آج تک اپنی اس پیرانہ سالی میں بھی آج بھی اس قدر ان کی آواز میں اور آج کو اپنی عزم میں اس قدر پرعزم ہے وہ کہ آپ ان کے اس میسج سے آپ سن لیجئے کہ وہ کیا فرماتے ہیں.
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم, بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. قالت ان الملوک اذا دخلوا قرية افسدوها وجعلوا عزة اهلها اذلة وكذلك يفعلون. آمنت باللہ صدق اللہ المولانا العظیم. دے استبداد جمہوری قوام پائی کو تو سمجھتا ہے یہ آزادی کی ہے نیلم پری. گرامی قدر سامعین حضرات, السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ.
وعلیکم السلام.
میرے لیے یہ بہت بڑی سعادت ہے کہ لندن میں جو ایک کانفرنس ہو رہی ہے ٹیررزم کے موضوع, اس میں آپ لوگوں نے میرے لیے بھی وقت نکالا ہے کہ میں اپنے خیالات کا اظہار کر سکوں اور آپ تک اپنے قلبی احساسات پہنچا سکوں. قرآن پاک کی جو آیت میں نے آپ حضرات کے سامنے تلاوت کی ہے یہ سورہ نمل کی آیت ہے, اور اللہ تعالیٰ ملکہ بلقیس کی زبان سے اس حقیقت کا اظہار فرما رہے ہیں کہ ان الملوک اذا دخلوا قریۃ, جب بھی حاکم لوگ, بادشاہ لوگ, قوت, اختیار اور اقتدار اور فوج اور طاقت رکھنے والے لوگ کسی خطے میں داخل ہو جاتے ہیں تو وہاں وہ فساد قائم کرتے ہیں, وہاں کے امن کو بگاڑتے ہیں, وہاں کے سکون کو چھینتے ہیں, وہاں کے انسانوں کی آزادی اور ان کی جو خودی ہے اس کو طاقت کی بنیاد پہ پامال کرتے ہیں, اور جو عزت والے لوگ ہوتے ہیں ان کی عزت کو پامتے ہیں اور ان کو ذلیل اور خوار کرتے ہیں اپنے اقتدار کے نشے میں آ کر. اور تاریخ کے ہر دور میں ایسا ہی ہوتا چلا آ رہا ہے. اقبال مرحوم کا یہ شعر بھی اس حقیقت کی ترجمانی کر رہا ہے کہ دیو استبداد جمہوری قوام پائے کو جمہوریت اور آزادی کا لباس پہن کر ظلم اور جبر کے دیو کو نچایا جا رہا ہے, اور عام لوگ جو اس حقیقت کو سمجھنے سے قاصر ہوتے ہیں, جن میں ذہنی بالیدگی تاریخ پر نظر نہیں ہوتی، اور جو خاص طور استبدادی قوتوں کے مکر و فن کو اور ان کے کرتبوں کو اور ان کی ریشہ دوانیوں کو جاننے جتنا رکھتے ہوں، وہ اس کو آزادی سمجھتے ہیں، اس ناچنے والے ظلم اور جبر کے دیو کو۔ تو یہی صورتحال آج ہم پوری دنیا میں دیکھ رہے ہیں کہ جہاں کہیں استبدادی اور سامراجی قوتیں ہیں، وہ مظلوموں کو غلام بناتے ہیں طاقت کی بنیاد پہ، اور اس غلامی کو وہ آزادی کا نام دیتے ہیں، اور جمہوریت کے نام پر یہ سب کچھ وہ کر رہے ہیں جو جمہوریت کے منافی ہے، جو انسانی اقدار کے منافی ہے، جو اخلاقی اقدار کے منافی ہے، اور جو لوگوں کی آزادی کے منافی ہے، وہ سب کچھ کرتے ہیں، لیکن نام دیتے ہیں آزادی کا، نام دیتے ہیں جمہوریت کا، نام دیتے ہیں ترقی کا، نام دیتے ہیں لبرل، یعنی جو کچھ بھی وہ چاہتے ہیں ان کے من پسند نام اس کو دیے جاتے ہیں جو وہ ظلم اور جبر ڈھا رہے ہیں۔ میرے نزدیک ٹیررزم کے تین ان کے دائرے ہیں، یا ان کے تین حیثیتیں ہیں، تین شکلیں ہیں جن سے ان کو جانا جا سکتا ہے۔ ایک تو ٹیررزم انفرادی سطح پہ ہو سکتا ہے، کسی انسان کو جنون آ جائے، یا وہ شراب میں مبتلا ہو، شراب کی لت لگی ہو اسے، یا کوئی انتقامی جذبہ اسے پیدا ہو گیا ہو، اور وہ طاقت کا استعمال کر کے اپنے ان لوگوں کو نشانہ بنائے جو اس کے ساتھ کسی قسم کا اختلاف رکھتے ہوں یا اناد رکھتے ہوں، یا ان کے ساتھ اس کی کوئی ناچار ہو، اس کے طرز عمل سے بیزار ہوں اور اس کو نصیحت کر رہے ہوں، اسے بچانے کی کوشش کر رہے ہوں، تو وہ جنونی کیفار ہو کر طاقت کا استعمال کرتا ہے، اور پھر بغیر کسی مقصد کے، بغیر کسی کاز اور نظریہ کے وہ اپنی طاقت کا استعمال کر لوگوں کو تشدد کا نشانہ بناتا ہے۔ تو یہ انفرادی سطح پہ یہ ٹیررزم کی مثال ہے، اور اس کی بھی بہت سی مثالیں دنیا میں رکھتی ہیں، جیسے ہم پڑھتے ہیں یا دیکھتے ہیں کبھی امریکہ میں کسی سکول میں کوئی جوان نکلتا ہے اور سکول بچوں اور بچیوں کو نشانہ بناتا ہے بغیر کسی جواز کے، اور اسی طرح کسی بازار میں گھس کر کوئی فرد اپنی جنونی کیفیت کا مظاہرہ کر کے گولیاں چلاتا ہے، اور ایسے واقعات بہرحال دنیا کے گوشے گوشے میں اس نوعیت کے واقعات دیکھے اور سنے جا سکتے ہیں۔ ایک تو یہ ٹیررزم، دوسرا ٹیررزم ہے کوئی گروپ بنتا ہے ایسے لوگوں کا جو سمجھتے ہیں کہ بھئی ہمارا ایک کاز ہے، ہماری جو قوم ہے جس کے ساتھ ہم وابستہ ہیں، ان کا پیدائشی اور بنیادی حق چھینا جا رہا ہے طاقت کی بنیاد پہ، اور اس چھینا جبکہ میں لوگوں کے حقوق پامال، اور ہم اپنی اس مظلوم قوم کی مظلومیت کو ختم کرنے کے لیے، اور جو طاقتور قوتیں اس پر مسلط ہو چکی ہیں طاقت کی بنیاد پہ، بندوق کی بنیاد پہ، فوج کی اکثریت کی بنیاد پہ، یا اپنے ملک کے ہجوم کی بنیاد پہ، یا اپنے ملک کی اکثریت کی آبادی کی بنیاد پر، یا فوجی طاقت اور اسلحہ کی بنیاد پر وہ قوتیں قابض ہو جاتی ہیں، اور ان کے خلاف ایک قوم جو ہے وہ بے بس ہو جاتی ہے۔ تو اس بے بس قوم میں سے کچھ لوگ ایسے نکلتے ہیں جو سرفروشی کا کردار ادا کرتے ہیں، اور ان کا یہ ٹارگٹ ہوتا ہے، ان کا یہ کاز ہوتا ہے کہ بھائی ہم ہماری مظلوم قوم کو یہ ظلم اور جبر سے نائی جائے۔ یہ گروپ کی طرف سے ایسا ہوتا ہے، اور اگر اس گروپ کی طرف سے بھی کہیں انسانی اور اخلاقی اقدار کی پامالی ہو، اور وہ نہتے لوگوں کو شکار بنائیں، جیسے آج دنیا میں مختلف جگہوں پر مقامات پر دیکھا جا سکتا ہے کہ ایک طرف تو بہت دعویٰ کیا جا رہا ہے کہ بھائی ہمارا کاز ہے، لیکن دوسری طرف وہ انسانی حقوق کی پامالیوں کی انتہاؤں کو چھو رہے ہیں، اور خود اپنے ہی بھائیوں کی گردنیں کاٹتے ہیں۔ برادر کشی کا ماحول بنایا جا رہا ہے، جس کو دیکھ کر رونگٹے کھڑے ہو جاتے ہیں کہ یہ کیا ہو رہا ہے، یہ برادر کشی کا ماحول ہے، اور جس ٹہنی پہ لوگ بیٹھے ہوتے ہیں اسی ٹہنی کو کاٹتے ہیں، جس قوم کا لوگ حصہ ہے اسی قوم کو نشانہ بناتے ہیں، خواتین کو، ان کے بچوں کو، ان کے نہتے لوگوں کو، ان کے نماز پڑھنے والوں کو، ان کے مسجدوں کی طرف جانے والوں کو یا زیارت इबादतगाहों की तरफ जाने वालों को निशाना बनाते हैं या मसले की इख्तिलाफात की बुनियाद पे एक दूसरे को निशाना बनाते हैं। तो यहाँ भी अगर एक तरफ कहा जा रहा है कि हमने एक काज है, लेकिन दूसरी तरफ जब एक्शंस को देखा जा रहा है तो एक्शंस की बुनियाद पे उसको बहरहाल टेररिज्म से ही ताबीर किया है कि एक्शंस काज के तकाजों के मुताबिक नहीं होते। और तीसरा टेररिज्म जो है जिसकी आज सारी दुनिया में छाप है वो है स्टेट टेररिज्म, यानी स्टेट का जो स्टेट के पास जो ताकत होती है, फौज होती है, असला होता है और रिसोर्सेज होते हैं वसी पैमाने के, वो उनको इस्तेमाल करते हैं किसी कौम को गुलाम बनाने के लिए या किसी मुल्क में जो रिसोर्सेज होते हैं, उनके जो जराया होते हैं, कहीं तेल होता है, कहीं मादनियात होते हैं, कहीं लोहा होता है, कहीं गैस होता है, कहीं तांबा होता है, कहीं सोने की कानें होती हैं और कहीं पानी की कसरत होती है जहाँ से बिजली प्रोजेक्टों को किया उनका इस्तेफादा कर सकता है, उनको तामीर किया जा सकता है। तो इस तरह ये स्टेट टेररिज्म जो है मेरे नजदीक ये सबसे बड़ी लानत है पूरी इंसानी बरादरी के लिए और इसकी तरफ तो बहुत कम तवज्जो जा रही है कि स्टेट टेररिज्म को निशाना बनाया जाए और इससे आलमी बरादरी और इंसानी बरादरी को बचाया जा सके, जैसे बगैर किसी।
हाज़रीन माफ़ कीजिएगा, इसके बाद यानी वो लाइन कट गई और क्योंकि वहाँ से लाइन काट दी गई और उसके बाद मैंने बहुत कोशिश की कि गिलानी साहब से फिर से वो बात, लेकिन इत्तेफाक से उनसे बात ना हो सकी। लेकिन पता चला कि उनका टेलीफोन ही घर से टेलीफोन डिस्कनेक्ट कर दिया गया है। ये जमहूरी हुकूमत का वो तोहफा था जो मैं आपको सबसे आखिर में सबूत के साथ बताना चाहता था।
I think Gilani Sahab read Iqbal's Share twice, and I mean it's been difficult for me to understand Iqbal because he was such a great philosopher, and sometimes we don't have the grasp of Urdu language. So there are people who are speaking Punjabis who don't speak. So I think I would like to translate that particular couplet. देवे इस्तवदाद जबूरी कबाब में पाए कौब, तू समझता है कि आज़ादी की है नीलम परी? What does it mean? It actually, when translated in English, with my English, evil forces of oppression are trampling in the garb of democracy. Please mark the words. Evil forces of oppression are trampling in the garb of democracy. Oh, you simpletons. He addresses Allama Iqbal, he said, oh, you simpletons, why is thy so charmed with the glitter of democracy? Now, democracy, when he talked about democracy, or when Gilani Sahab talked about, how many crimes have been committed in the name of democracy? Now that is what has been. Like there was an old American adage, oh liberty, thy liberty, how many crimes are committed in thy name? Likewise, oh terrorism, oh war on terrorism, how many crimes are being committed in thy name? That is precisely what is even happening today. I won't be taking too long. I will not be summarizing what each speaker has said. There's a lot to absorb, but I think it's very crystal clear because they provided the synopsis of it themselves. About Mr. D'Souza, he had prepared a very wonderful paper that was about Hindutva terror in India. And I should be recommending that you read that paper as well. By and large, we must not forget we are at the moment in this epoch at a very dangerous crossroad. The rules and guiding principles governing the use of war and terror have been so vague and have been so liberalized that when a US-sponsored war and terror becomes an instrument of peace, condoned and accepted by world institutions, including the United Nations, don't forget that. Just take, for example, Libya. It's a matter of opinion. Now, it's well over 3 months when attack on Libya has been continuing against one person, Gaddafi. Why? What was UN sanctions given? What were the UN's orders? To prevent the killing of civilians by Gaddafi. I can assure you, I hope not that I'm wrong, that by the time that Gaddafi is removed, by the time the NATO forces are so-called accomplished their target, which they have failed to do in Iraq and Iraq till today, the casualties would have been much more than all the people that Gaddafi has been instrumental in their deaths and their killing. And what about the sovereignty of that nation? We must respect the sovereignty of nations. Even if something is happening wrong in terms of human rights, there should be methods available to resolve those issues. It should not be violence. Violence always promotes violence. War and terror has produced more terrorists than you can ever think of. War and terror has killed 1,000 times more people than what were killed in Twin Towers. So is that the kind of war that you engage in? What is a war? Now, again, I said that through three soldiers sitting here, war and terror primarily, any war basically implies that where politics have failed, it's an extension. And you want to come and so that you can negotiate a peace. It is not that you destroy the enemy. In the modern times, even the previous time, you cannot destroy an enemy. The idea, the thing always remain inside. My final word is dealing with Pakistan. All the speakers have said, but I'd like to talk a little bit about Pakistan. Pakistan, I'm saying that with a purpose, like Mr. Gilani was saying something about Pakistan of today is sandwiched by terrorism from the east and the west. Since the occupation of Afghanistan, the threat of terror from the west in the garb of Taliban has been taken very heavy toll. Analysts in Pakistan blame India and United States for the destabilization of Pakistan. It is a fact that prior to 9/11, there was not a single case, as pointed out by, I think, Brigadier Hamid, of a suicide bomb in Pakistan. He has worked in some top establishments and security establishments in Pakistan. I want to ask him the question. 2 years prior to 9/11, had he ever heard of Al-Qaeda? Where the hell this monster of Al-Qaeda appear all of a sudden? Well, again, cabal. I mean, and again, it's not a conspiracy theory at all. The casualties of terror that have taken place in Pakistan as a direct result of the, not state-sponsored terrorism. I'm not talking state about terrorism. The killing in Pakistan by the terrorists in Pakistan, paid or by someone or motivated themselves, is the highest in the world today. All the other countries put together, including 9/11, Pakistan far surpasses them in terms of the price that Pakistanis are paying. And mind you, these are not just the armed forces. In terms of armed forces, since 9/11, Pakistani armed forces have paid the heaviest price. More than 3,500 people have been killed. And you will be quite surprised, just like to tell you, and why I'm saying that is the resolve of the people of Pakistan there. For every 4 soldiers that were killed, 1 officer was killed. And this is particularly true of the SWAT operation, or the operation in South Waziristan. They've been led from the front. What I'm trying to say is, despite the dismal picture that we are today, we are crossroads like that, the resolve of the people of Pakistan has not dwindled. We are being ruled by a corrupt regime. We are being ruled by a corrupt regime who are as passive as can be. Even some of the hierarchies at various places, even in the armed forces of Pakistan, are working for somebody else. But I want to tell you one thing. I, for one, and many of my friends sitting here, we are not disheartened. We are sad. We are very angry. But the fact of the matter is, out of this evil and out of all this, something better is going to emerge. It's not because I'm a wishful thinker, because things are pointing in that particular direction. This is going to be the most powerful superpower in the world, or a dynasty which stayed for the shortest possible time. Things are changing very rapidly, as has been pointed out by various geopolitical events that are taking place. So, ladies and gentlemen, all I can say is, on behalf of our analysis at Institute of South Asia, don't lose heart, have hope. In the end, the truth prevails, right? Tyranny cannot go on forever, but not to raise a voice against tyranny is committing a tyranny yourself. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, thank you very much.